Chapter 1206. The Hua faction was very powerful. From the second day onwards, people were talking about the truth of the Eagle Beak Mountain incident. Ling Han had obtained 4 drops of thousand-source true fluid by himself, creating history. In truth, someone had said this before, but it had immediately been drowned out by the overwhelming public opinion that was against Ling Han. But now it was the Hua faction that was putting in the effort. It was just like how the Gao faction had easily allowed the image of Ling Han being an executioner, who killed and robbed others of their treasures, to be deeply ingrained in everyone's hearts. The power of the Hua faction was naturally not something that any individual could compare to. Even if young king tiers like He Tao and Shen Zhuer spoke up, it was useless. How could the Hua faction and the Gao faction, which had been operating for tens of thousands of years, compare to them? Now that the Hua faction and the Gao faction had begun their battle, the public opinion naturally could not be one-sided anymore. Instead, 2 voices were clashing. One side was slandering Ling Han, while the other side was setting up a positive image for Ling Han. The truth was actually not important. What was important was which of the 2 factions was stronger. Surprisingly, a new faction quickly joined the fray. The Hu faction. The founder of the Hu faction was the 9th disciple of Venerable Trinity. His name was Hu Xiangdi. He had no children, and the young master of the Hu faction was his only disciple. Her name was Lei Linglong, and she was an outstanding beauty. The Hu faction was inclined to suppress Ling Han. At this time, the matter of Ling Han itself was no longer important. This had become a stage for the disciples of Venerable Trinity to display their strength. They were fighting for the right to become the only true disciple, and would trample on the other side. Or rather, they wanted to use this matter to trample on a few people. Ling Han was the fuse, and the Hua faction's participation announced the start of this battle. Following that, even more disciples of Venerable Trinity joined in. Tai Gate, Lang Gate, Nye Gate, Jing Gate, and Lu Gate. 8 of the 9 great disciples were involved, and the current situation just happened to be 4 against 4. Only the Chu faction had not expressed its stance. Who would have thought that a mere mountain river tier disciple could actually trigger an intense battle between the 9 great disciples to display their strength? But the conditions of the Hua faction had also changed. Previously, Ji Yunji had proposed a condition on behalf of the Hua faction, and was willing to spend a large sum of money to purchase a drop of thousand-source true fluid. In return, they would help Ling Han resolve the pressure from the Gao faction. But when Tai Men, Nye Men, and Lu Men also joined the alliance, Ji Yunji came to see Ling Han again. "I'm really sorry. In order to fight against the alliance of the Lao, Lang, Jian, and Hu sects, young master was forced to get the help of the other 3 sects. But he couldn't just let them attack for no reason." Ji Yunji smiled apologetically. Young master said that she hopes that senior apprentice brother Han can take out all 4 drops of thousand-source true fluid. Seeing Ling Han's complexion darken, she quickly said, "Of course the young master won't treat senior apprentice brother Han unfairly. You can buy it for 1,000,000 true essence stones per drop." "Are you robbing us?" Ling Han almost laughed out loud. He had earned over 2,000,000 true origin stones by selling alchemical pills in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Yet the thousand-source true fluid could only be sold for 1,000,000 true origin stones? This was a treasure that even heavenly body tier elites would value highly. "Your young master really knows how to joke." Ling Han shook his head. He finally understood that whether it was the Hua faction or the Gao faction, there was actually no difference. It was just a dog-eat-dog situation. He actually still held hope in the Hua faction. He was really too naive. Ji Yunji also felt guilty inside, but how could she not carry out the young master's orders? She stretched out a hand to press down on Ling Han's palm, and said, "Senior apprentice brother Han, young master Hua will use other methods to compensate you." Ling Han withdrew his hand and said, "Junior apprentice sister Ji, please conduct yourself with dignity. I'll also give you a word of advice. Is a man who can send you around like a commodity worth entrusting his entire life to?" Ji Yunji's pretty face couldn't help but change color. Hua Yongwen had ordered that she could appropriately sacrifice some of her beauty to pacify Ling Han. She was naturally unwilling, yet did not dare to disobey his orders. Now that she had been exposed by Ling Han, she almost wanted to die from embarrassment and indignation. "There is no need for senior apprentice brother Han to worry about my matters," she said coldly. "In short, hand over the thousand-source true fluid. And you can have me. Tua tua tua. The old ginseng suddenly popped out. This guy's eyes were already shining with golden light. Hearing such an alluring conversation, how could he possibly resist? He popped out from who knew where. Girl, take off your clothes first, and let Grandpa Ginseng inspect. Scram. Ling Han kicked out, and the old ginseng was instantly sent flying by him. Ah! The old ginseng screamed. Brat, you're burning the bridge after you've outlived your usefulness. You can't even let Grandpa Ginseng have some soup. You can't be so disloyal. You miser, you keep all the good things to yourself. Grandpa Ginseng will cross you. Ji Yunji's face twitched involuntarily. What the hell was this? Ling Han waved his hand and said, Go back and don't come again in the future. Since young Master Hua is not sincere, then our previous agreement is completely nullified. Senior apprentice Brother Han. Ji Yunji revealed a sinister expression. You have already offended the Gao faction. If you offend our Hua faction as well, it will be difficult for you to take a single step in the sect. You speak as if the whole world is run by you people. Ling Han said indifferently. Speak less now. At most, I will only dislike the Hua faction, but if you continue to draw hatred, the Hua faction will also be on my hit list in the future. I can also give you a warning. Being on my hit list, there will definitely not be a good outcome for you. He showed a confident smile. There would come a day when he would surpass the heavenly body tier and reach the eternal river tier. At that time, even if Venerable Trinity moved, he would not be able to stop him from seeking justice from the so-called Gao faction and Hua faction. He, the Rain Emperor Feng Puyun and Ding Ping, which one of them was not a prodigy? As long as they were given enough time, they could even poke a hole in the sky. Don't bully the young for being poor. Ji Yunji couldn't help but be subdued by Ling Han's domineering manner. After a long while, she finally said, Since senior apprentice Brother Han insists on acting your own way, I will report to young master truthfully. Farewell. She turned to leave. Since they could not see eye to eye, there was naturally nothing more to be said. It would only worsen the relationship between them. Brat, you are really too stupid. There is a girl who is willing to take off her clothes on her own, so why don't you do it? The old ginseng ran back, his face filled with the air of a hoodlum. Ling Han sighed and said, You have really reincarnated into the wrong body. Since you like people taking off their clothes so much, why don't you go and squat in the bathing pool? Hee 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 hee. This old ginseng released a series of evil laughter. How do you know that Grandpa Ginseng has not been there before? Fuck, this perverted ginseng. Ling Han shook his head, too lazy to argue with him. Now, he had also pushed the Hua faction out. Then, even if the Hua faction and the others did not side with the Gao faction, there would be as many as 4 factions targeting Ling Han. Now that things had come to this, the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring. Whether Ling Han was guilty or not, they had to nail Ling Han to death. Otherwise, the 4 factions would lose all face. A single Gao faction was enough to pressure Ling Han to the point of suffocation. What more now that there were 4 factions? Chapter 1208. Zhu Tianqiu was shocked. He was only in the mountain river tier, yet his explosive speed was actually above his own. Was this possible? However, he had to believe it even if he didn't. The distance between him and Ling Han not only didn't shrink, but was instead continuously widening. Thankfully, he thought. Previously, it was indeed a very wise decision to have the other person guard Ling Han at the auction venue. Otherwise, the two of them could only sigh behind Ling Han. However, Ling Han knew that he couldn't maintain this kind of speed for long. This was a bit like the ultimate arrow, exploding with terrifying speed for a short period of time, but not as exaggerated as the ultimate arrow. He could maintain this kind of speed for about 15 minutes. And this was under the premise that he hadn't completely grasped the star-plucking step. If he could truly grasp the essence of this movement technique, his explosive speed could be even faster. Not long after, Ling Han's speed decreased, but he had also arrived at the foot of the mountain, and the small town was already in front of him. Just a little bit more. Han Lin still not stopping? A cold hump sounded, and an elite of the Sun Moon tier appeared, blocking Ling Han's path like a god. Whether I stop or not, what does it have to do with you? Ling Han's figure flashed, wanting to circle around him. What a joke. You see I'm standing guard here and you want to pass? This sun-moon tier cultivator smirked coldly and made a grab at Ling Han. He was in the late stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier, and when this strike was delivered, a sun and moon swayed, exuding a frightening might. This wasn't the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, where there would be restrictions that targeted power above the sun-moon tier. Ling Han clenched his fist and punched out. What are you courting, death? Yu Ci's heart skipped a beat. A mere mountain river tier actually dared to challenge a sun-moon tier. Where did this courage come from? He humphed, but restrained some of his power to avoid beating Ling Han to death. As long as he wasn't convicted, Ling Han would remain a seed of the majestic heaven sect. Thus he could only invite him back for a hearing. If he crippled or even killed Ling Han, he would have to pay a corresponding price. His fist smashed into the huge hand that was descending from above, and a terrifying shockwave immediately arose. Pung 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 pung. The surrounding rocks were all shattered. Yu Ci revealed an expression of disbelief. Ling Han's punch had actually blocked him. This. The peak of the Lamita realm. You've actually reached the peak of the Lamita realm. He was indescribably shocked. The pinnacle realm was the domain of kings, but even so, not every king could cultivate the pinnacle realm to the peak. This was because this was the pinnacle realm. In this realm, every step forward was extremely difficult. How old was Ling Han? He had already reached the peak of the Lamita realm. Furthermore, reaching the peak of the pinnacle of the Lamita realm meant that one's strength could transcend an entire realm. This brat was now equivalent to the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier, and though he was in the late stage of the low extreme, he restrained some of his power because he was afraid of smacking Ling Han to death. As a result, their power levels were actually about the same. It's nothing. No need to worship me so much, Ling Han said with a smile. Humph, so what if it's the peak of the Lamita realm? It's only equivalent to the early stage of the low extreme. I can still easily suppress it. Yu Ci said. This was good as well. He could use his full power, and he didn't have to worry about accidentally killing Ling Han and losing his life. He used the power of the sun and moon, divine patterns blossoming all over his body, and unleashed his full battle prowess. Brat, today, I'll let you know that the gap between the mountain river tier and the sun-moon tier is not only in power, but also in the grasp of the Tao of heaven and earth. Hong He similarly threw a punch. Divine patterns intertwined, forming a terrifying might. Ling Han took it head-on, but was immediately sent flying, blood spurting from all over his body. He gritted his teeth and crawled to his feet. Yu Ci was right. The sun-moon tier was stronger than the mountain river tier not only in power, but also in the grasp of the regulations of heaven and earth. He had cultivated to the peak stage of the pinnacle level, and was theoretically only 2 stars weaker than Yu Ci, but added with the regulations of heaven and earth, this gap was extraordinarily large. Why was it said that 10 stars of power could rival the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier? That was because this kind of sun-moon tier had just stepped into a new domain, and their comprehension of regulations was about the same as the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Obediently follow me back to the sect to be interrogated. Yu Ci attacked again. He opened his mouth and spat out a large brown bird, which flapped its wings and flew towards Ling Han. This was a giant bird, and when it spread its wings it was 300 meters long. Its whole body was covered with divine patterns, and this was an attack completely formed from the regulations of heaven and earth. Ling Han didn't take it head-on. He had already tried, and the other's battle prowess was indeed above his. Taking it head-on would only be seeking trouble. He used the star-plucking step. Though it no longer possessed extreme speed, it was erratic, making it impossible for Yu Ci to lock onto him. Thus, the attack couldn't possibly unleash the power it should have. Yu Ci wasn't in a hurry though. Zhu Tianqiu should be arriving very soon. The latter had cultivation at the peak stage of the low extreme, and to say nothing of teaming up with him, he alone would be enough to take down Ling Han. He only had to keep Ling Han occupied, and not let him go to the auction venue. He was sure that Ling Han wouldn't hand over a treasure like the 1000-source true fluid to the Mo clan trading company in advance, so who could be at ease? True enough, Zhu Tianqiu arrived after a short while. His explosive speed was indeed not as fast as Ling Han's, but he had the advantage in that he had a long endurance. Thus he only arrived slightly later than Ling Han. Ha ha ha, where are you going? Zhu Tianqiu was a little flushed. A mighty elite of the Sun Moon tier actually let a mountain river tier slip away. How humiliating. Ling Han chuckled and said, all right, I'll follow you guys back to the sect. Instantly, Zhu Tianqiu and Yuxi felt as if they had punched empty air. At first, they had wanted to properly deal with Ling Han, but had not imagined that Ling Han would be so decisive. However, since Ling Han couldn't enter the town, he naturally couldn't hand over the 1,000-source true fluid to the Mo Clan Trading Company, so they could be considered to have completed their mission perfectly. Then let's go, the two of them said with dark expressions. Ling Han didn't look disappointed at all, which made Yuxi and Zhu Tianqiu very confused. That was because Ling Han's plan had obviously failed, so how could he still be so calm? They couldn't figure it out. The three of them walked towards the main peak. The two elites of the Sun Moon tier sandwiched Ling Han in the middle, their origin power condensed but not released. They could explode with their strongest attack at any time to prevent Ling Han from escaping. Yet Ling Han didn't plan to escape at all. He smiled and said, are you guys thinking that I clearly couldn't hand over the 1,000-source true fluid to the Mo Clan Trading Company? I've completely failed, so why am I still so calm? Yuxi and Zhu Tianqiu were both startled. This was indeed a question that they didn't understand, but hearing it so easily from Ling Han's mouth, it gave them a very strange feeling. Humph, since you already know that you've completely failed, then obediently hand over the 1,000-source true fluid. You have to know that with your abilities, there's no way you can guard so much divine fluid, Yuxi said coldly. Ling Han smiled and said I know that you guys have included my friends and disciple in your surveillance, but in truth I'm only bait. Now that I've appeared, you guys have all come to chase after me. That disciple of mine should have already handed it over to the Mo Clan Trading Company. Chapter 1209. Oh, what? Zhu Tianqiu and Yuxi almost jumped up. Ling Han was actually just bait? Why did they have to deal with Ling Han? Although he had disobeyed the Yan Huang, this was not enough for the Gao faction to spend so much effort to deal with him. The most important thing was still for the 4 drops of 1,000-source true fluid. But now, the 1,000-source true fluid was actually handed over to the Mo Clan establishment for auction. Then, so what if they captured Ling Han? They had been tricked. Don't look like you've eaten a dead child. You should know that the 1,000-source true fluid is mine in the first place. You guys are anxious for my things. Should I thank you? Ling Han said with a smile, his tone filled with mockery. Before he went into seclusion, he had handed the 1,000-source true fluid and the other auction items to Ding Ping, and he had also predicted that the Gao faction would definitely keep an eye on the people around him. Thus he used himself as bait, attracting everyone here today. This was very normal. The culprit had appeared, so shouldn't they capture the culprit? You're lying. Zhu Tianqiu shouted. He had already suffered a loss at the hands of Ling Han. If he was tricked by Ling Han again, he would really be unable to raise his head in public. Yes, you definitely want to lure us back to the town, and then take the chance to escape, Yuxi said. Ling Han shrugged and said only a loser would stubbornly think that he hasn't failed. Fine, let's go quickly. This farce should end. I don't want to bear a groundless crime, even if it's just suspicion. Zhu Tianqiu and Yuxi exchanged a look. It was already too late to return to the Mo Clan establishment now. They could only escort Ling Han back. At least they had completed this task. After a while, they arrived at the White Jade Palace on the main peak. The White Jade was flawless. This was the place where the sect interrogated people. Whether they were black or white would naturally be revealed after the interrogation. Knowing that Ling Han had been brought to justice, a few elites instantly rushed over. They were the main interrogators. There were 5 in total, and they were all at the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier. Heavenly Body tier elites naturally wouldn't personally interrogate a measly Mountain River tier cultivator. Who would be so free? If even Heavenly Body tier elites were like this, then there was no need to even mention Eternal River tier elites. Venerable Trinity spent almost all of his time cultivating, and rarely came out of seclusion. However, wasn't the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier not enough? Aside from 1 Eternal River tier and 24 Heavenly Body tier elites, this was the strongest force they had. Even in the entire galaxy, this was not a force that could be underestimated. Han Lin, why aren't you kneeling in front of us? shouted one of the judges. His name was Shen Kuo, and he sat in the middle of the 5 judges. Ling Han said indifferently, "This disciple didn't violate any sect rules, so what crime is there to speak of? Moreover, as a seed, there's no need for me to kneel and kowtow to the lords, right? Greetings to the lords." He cupped his fists and nodded at the 5 of them as a sign of respect. "What an arrogant person," another judge, Ma Gai, said. His eyes were very narrow, and there was a hint of femininity to them. "Young man, the stubborn are easily broken. Those who are too arrogant never have good endings." "Oh, are you talking about Yang Hao, my lord?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "This guy is indeed arrogant. He's clearly at the Sun Moon tier, yet he publicly attacked a Mountain River tier cultivator. He ignored the sect rules, and he actually didn't receive any punishment after causing trouble. This is simply illogical." "Pooh!" The 5 judges almost exploded in anger. "You really know how to fucking spout nonsense." Yang Hao was indeed arrogant, but he was a super prodigy that only appeared once in a million years. Moreover, he was more likely to be taken as a disciple by Venerable Trinity, so he had the right to be arrogant. Moreover, Yang Hao had been beaten very badly in the end, and even his life essence had been expelled. He had at least lost a few hundred years of his lifespan. Although a few hundred years wasn't long for elites who were destined to reach the heavenly body tier, it wasn't short either. When their lifespan reached its end, even a few hours would be incredibly precious, let alone a few hundred years. Yang Hao didn't even cry out after suffering such a huge loss. Yet Ling Han was still making sarcastic remarks here. Was there still any justice in this world? "Han Lin, don't change the topic." Shen Kuo coughed heavily. This time he was interrogating Ling Han to see if he had committed any crimes, so what was the point of shifting the topic to someone else? He coldly asked, "Do you know your crimes?" "What crimes?" Ling Han countered with a smile. "You slaughtered Shiming and the others from the Gao faction in the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, and stole their 1,000-source true fluid," Shen Kuo said darkly. He even used the aura of the Sun Moon tier to suppress Ling Han. It was a pity that Ling Han's spirit had been tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so it was stable and tough. Moreover, he had also refined the remnant essence of a demon master. If one wanted to suppress his spirit, they would at least need to be a supreme elite of the Genesis tier. The Sun Moon tier wasn't enough. Ling Han stood proudly and said, "What do you mean by good or bad? I've never seen or heard of it." "Sophistry." Ma Gui humphed. "If you didn't have a guilty conscience, why did you disappear for a few months? I couldn't find you no matter what." "My lord, you really like to joke. Isn't it normal for cultivators to cultivate in seclusion?" Ling Han said with a smile. Could it be that when my lord is cultivating in seclusion, he would make a special report to the sect? Ma Gui was instantly rendered speechless. Sect disciples could naturally cultivate in seclusion at any time, but the timing of Ling Han's seclusion was too coincidental. No matter what, they were all fleeing to escape punishment. Shen Kuo waved his hand and said, "Today is a fair trial to determine whether you are guilty or innocent. Thus you haven't been tortured yet. The sect definitely won't force you to confess, but they won't allow a real criminal to escape either." "My lord is fair," Ling Han said with a smile, but his tone was naturally filled with disbelief. Shen Kuo really wanted to slap this guy to death, but when he thought of the movement techniques of this seed, he could only suppress his urge. Moreover, if it weren't for the fact that Ling Han had come from a small world and had a clean background, how would they dare to treat a seed like this? Which seed didn't have heavenly body tier connections? Situations like Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, and Ding Ping were too unique. 3 seed-level geniuses had actually appeared from the same small world. He calmed his emotions and said, "You are temporarily innocent, but the ownership of the 1,000-source true fluid is still a matter of debate. Thus, I want you to hand over the 1,000-source true fluid first. If it belongs to you, we will naturally return it to you." In the end, it was still for the 1,000-source true fluid. This was very normal. If it was just Ling Han himself, how could he be worthy of the Gao faction making such a move? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "My lord means that the 1,000-source true fluid might have been obtained by that evil sect? My lord is really good at joking. How could a bunch of weaklings like them possibly obtain the 1,000-source true fluid? let alone 4 drops. Oh, that's right. I heard that Yang Hao also obtained 2 drops in the past. If these 4 drops were obtained by some evil sect, doesn't that mean that they're even more powerful than Yang Hao? Weaklings. Shen Kuo and the others all grimaced. They were actually all members of the Gao faction. Although Ling Han hadn't mentioned any names, he had still insulted all of them. A measly cultivator at the mountain river tier was practically pointing at their noses and calling them weaklings. How could they accept this? This person with a sharp tongue. Chapter 12:10. Ling Han waved his hand with a smile and said, "To be honest, I've already handed the 1000 source true fluid over to the Mo clan establishment for auction, so you can forget about it. If you don't believe me, you can ask around. With my understanding of you, I'm sure someone has already been at the auction venue, and they should have returned to report to me by now. Hurry up and start the trial. Although I'm innocent, I'm also very displeased to be slandered all the time." Shen Kuo, Ma Gai, and the others all wore dark expressions. Did this brat really think that he was here as a guest? He was far too calm and collected. However, if what he said was true, then they were in deep trouble. They walked towards Yu Tianchou and Yu Si, and the two of them instantly broke out in a cold sweat. If their young master didn't obtain the 1000 source true fluid, they would definitely have to bear heavy responsibility. When they thought of Gao Huang's methods, the two of them paled as if they were suffering from a serious illness. "Han Lin, how dare you?" Shen Kuo said in a stern voice. "The ownership of the 1000 source true fluid is still in dispute, yet you actually sold it in private? Do you still have any respect for the sect?" Ling Han chuckled and said, "Don't say such nonsense. The 1000 source true fluid is mine, and it's mine no matter what you say. If you don't believe me, you can have all the mountain river tier cultivators in the sect attack me. Can I defeat them all by myself? Such unskilled slander is truly meaningless. Let's talk about Ming and the others. Since you claim that I killed them, do you have witnesses or material evidence? Otherwise, it can't be that they appeared to you in your dreams, right?" Pooh! A few ordinary disciples who were maintaining order outside instantly burst into laughter. However, today wasn't a public trial, so they were very idle and no one was watching them. Shen Kuo's expression darkened. He had never thought that he would almost explode from anger because of a mountain river tier cultivator. This was simply impossible. Which mountain river tier cultivator dared to talk back to a sun moon tier cultivator? Moreover, even if he was, so what? He could just slap him to death. Could a mountain river tier cultivator overturn the heavens? However, under the current circumstances, he really couldn't make a move. Firstly, he still didn't know whether or not the 1000 source true fluid had actually been auctioned off. If it was hidden by Ling Han and he killed Ling Han, then he could only wait to be killed by Gao Huang. Secondly, Ling Han was a seed. As long as this identity was not removed, he would not be able to kill him. Because of this, Shen Kuo was naturally angry because he could only endure but not vent his anger. Bam! At this moment, the door of the White Jade Palace was suddenly pushed open. It must have been kicked open. After the door was opened, one could see a person maintaining a kicking posture. It was a young man with a slender figure and an extremely handsome appearance. However, the aura he exuded was incomparably terrifying, causing many people to have difficulty breathing. It was as if someone was strangling their necks. It was extremely uncomfortable. "Greetings, young master." Shen Kuo and the others immediately stood up and bowed respectfully to the newcomer. Meanwhile, the mountain river tier disciples all knelt on the ground. This person was Gao Huang. Ling Han turned around and walked toward this opponent that he had never met before. He wanted to remember this person's appearance so that he wouldn't kill the wrong person when he killed in the future. Gao Huang's expression was ugly. He strode into the palace, humped coldly and said, "What the hell are you trash doing? I've received a report that a drop of 1000 source true fluid has already been auctioned off. Since a drop had appeared, it meant that the remaining 3 drops were definitely in the hands of the Mo clan establishment." Shen Kuo and the others all fell silent. Although they were all elites at the Sun Moon tier, they were like weaklings in front of Gao Huang. There was nothing they could do. Gao Huang wasn't any weaker than them, yet his status was much higher. Moreover, he had a father at the peak stage of the heavenly body tier. Who could afford to offend him? Moreover, they were all members of the Gao faction, so how could they dare to disrespect their young master? Gao Huang turned his gaze toward Ling Han and said, "You hurry to the auction house and stop the auction." "Oh, why?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Because this is my command," Gao Huang said proudly. "Idiot!" Ling Han snorted. "Why you dare to scold me?" Gao Huang roared in anger. Ling Han shrugged and said, "If you weren't an idiot, why would you need to take this position? And if you really are an idiot, then I'm only speaking the truth. Speaking the truth counts as scolding someone, so I can only chuckle." Gao Huang instantly flew into a rage. He had never seen someone like Ling Han who could scold someone so boldly and confidently. He humphed and said, "It's rare to see someone who dares to act so arrogantly in the punishment hall. However, don't forget what kind of place this is. Interrogate them. Do whatever you need to do." Shen Kuo and the others looked at each other. "Aren't we in the middle of the interrogation? It's you who suddenly appeared and interrupted the interrogation, and you're actually blaming us?" However, did they dare to complain? After all, they weren't Ling Han. "Han Lin, no matter how eloquent you are today, you won't be able to escape the punishment of justice." Shen Kuo returned to his seat of honor. He suddenly slammed the table and said, "Summon the witnesses." After a short while, a few people walked out from the back of the palace. They were all young disciples at the mountain river tier. "Did any of you witness Han Lin killing Ming and the others?" asked Shen Kuo. The mountain river tier disciples nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir." "Han Lin, what do you say?" Shen Kuo asked Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly and said to one of the disciples, "Then let me ask you, what technique and weapon did I use to kill Ming?" The disciple who was being questioned couldn't help but freeze. This wasn't in the script. "What? You saw me kill someone but you don't even know how I did it?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "What's with that look in your eyes? Don't answer yet." Ling Han waved his hand and turned to the others. He said, "Since you all saw me kill someone, then tell me all at once. What weapon did I use to kill Ming? Don't rush. I'll count to 3 and you all answer together. 1, 2. Enough!" Shen Kuo suddenly shouted. "Han Lin, how long do you want to keep this up?" Ling Han was surprised and said, "Aren't I proving my own innocence? Moreover, this is a very simple question, isn't it? Since it was my turn to kill someone, I asked them what the murder weapon was. Isn't that a very reasonable thing to do?" "Humph, you're threatening the witness," Shen Kuo said harshly. "He in front of several Sun Moon tier masters. How could I dare to threaten the witness? I don't have the ability to do so," Ling Han said calmly. "Then I might as well not say anything. Are you all satisfied like this?" He as expected of a sharp-tongued person. There was a long laugh, and another person appeared at the door. No, it was 2 people, one in front and one behind. The one standing in front was also a handsome youth. His appearance was not inferior to Gao Huang's, and his strength was probably not low either. He also exuded a suffocating aura. Ling Han didn't recognize this person, but when Ling Han saw that the person behind was Ji Yunji, he could guess this person's identity. The young master of the Hua faction, Hua Yongwen. Chapter 12:12. Yang Hao had always had his way. He was born in a heavenly body tier force, and he had displayed astonishing talent in martial art from a young age. He had always been like the sun in the sky, and no matter where he went, he was revered as a prodigy. In his clan he had high hopes. Among his peers, he was an invincible prodigy, and everyone revered him. Even in the majestic heaven sect, he defeated all the prodigies and outshone them. He was blessed by the heavens, and he was destined to become an overlord. However, he had suffered a huge loss at the hands of Ling Han. Although it wasn't Ling Han who had attacked, he had almost been killed by Empress Luanxing, and he had even lost a significant amount of life essence. He would seek revenge from Empress Luanxing in the future, but for now he wanted to kill Ling Han first to collect some interest. "Han Lin, killing a fellow disciple is a huge crime, and it's even more despicable," he said coldly. "I suggest we tie him up at the entrance of the sect, and cut off a piece of his flesh every day until his blood runs dry, and his life essence runs dry. So ruthless. Everyone said in their hearts. It was difficult for immortals to die. As long as their vitals weren't damaged, it wouldn't matter even if their limbs were severed, or if their blood ran dry. After all, severed limbs could be regenerated, and fresh blood could be regenerated. However, all of this required life essence. Life essence couldn't be touched, but it definitely existed. In fact, there were evil techniques that could absorb life essence and turn it into nourishment for one's own body, which could slightly prolong one's lifespan and boost one's cultivation level. Yang Hao wanted to kill Ling Han by dismembering him, making him suffer until his life essence ran dry. How ruthless! Gao Huang and Hua Yongwen were both on guard. This young 10th uncle was a ruthless person, and they definitely couldn't afford to offend him. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Yang Hao, you're too useless. You actually need this kind of trash to fight for you? Come. Suppress your cultivation level and let's fight. How do I deal with you?" Yang Hao sneered and said, "Who do you think you are to fight with me? Don't say that I'm bullying you. If we're on the same level, I'll fight you with only one hand and one foot." Ling Han put his left hand behind his back and smiled. "How about I fight you with my right hand?" He switched to his other hand. "Too crazy, really too crazy. Martial Uncle Yang, why don't we capture this brat first and punish him so that he'll behave himself?" Gao Huang suggested. Although he was much older than Yang Hao, and his cultivation base was also slightly higher, he was still very humble. It wasn't easy for someone who was used to being arrogant to do this. Yang Hao nodded and said, "All right, capture him." He looked at Ling Han. How could such a minor character be qualified to fight against him? What a joke. Ling Han's heart clenched. They were finally going to meet on the battlefield. It was about time for him to enter the Black Tower and take his revenge another day. Humph! Come on, you haven't learned your lesson yet. And you're still biting indiscriminately. Hu Feiyun appeared with a cold humph. An aura that far surpassed the mountain river tear radiated from her body. It was Empress Luan Xing. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. He had already made arrangements for his retreat, yet Empress Luan Xing's actions could possibly disrupt his plans. After all, if Empress Luan Xing was in danger, how could he stay in the Black Tower? To say nothing of the various things that had happened between him and Empress Luan Xing, just the fact that she had attacked him for his sake alone made him feel embarrassed. Yang Hao had never feared anyone in his life, but when it came to Empress Luan Xing, an expression of fear appeared on his face. He had been beaten to the point of losing his temper, so it was difficult for him not to be traumatized. Pa! The Empress attacked, sending Yang Hao flying with a single slap. Pooh! Yang Hao spat out a mouthful of blood, and his spirit instantly weakened. It was too hurtful. Fortunately, the Empress had held back. Otherwise, if a supreme elite of the heavenly body tier had attacked, Yang Hao might have been able to survive. "Heh, sir, this is already the second time," a cold voice said. This was the majestic heaven sect. Two figures appeared at the same time. They both looked to be in their 50s, and there was an aura of primal chaos swirling around their faces. It was an impure appearance, and there were shockingly 4 heavenly bodies behind them. Gao Huang and Hua Yongwen were overjoyed, and they each called out, "Father." Venerable Trinity's 2 personal disciples were the 4th disciple, the leader of the Gao faction, Gao Feng, and the 6th disciple, the leader of the Hua faction, Hua Yongning. Both of them were supreme elites at the peak stage of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. "Sir, you've gone too far," Hua Yongning said coldly. "This is the majestic heaven sect, not your chaotic star's majestic empire. You want to stop me?" Empress Luan Xing said calmly, but there was a supreme domineering tone in her voice. In terms of aura, who could compare to a sovereign? Moreover, Hua Yongning and Gao Feng weren't even sect leaders. They were at the same cultivation level, but in terms of domineering aura, Empress Luan Xing was superior to them. However, Ling Han spoke up and said, "Your Imperial Majesty, this is my business, so please don't interfere." He winked at Empress Luan Xing with all his might. "It's not like you don't know that I have a spatial god tool, so who could harm your man?" However, Empress Luan Xing saw this and calmly said, "He's one of my people. I heard that you wanted to interrogate him, so I'm only here to observe." "Observe your sister?" Observing would cause Yang Hao to spew blood all over his body, and he would also lose some of his life essence. However, if a heavenly body tier elite wanted to distort the truth, there was really nothing you could do, unless you started fighting. Hua Yongning and Gao Feng both looked apprehensive. They were facing an empress, so they definitely couldn't underestimate her. However, they were only apprehensive. After all, they believed that this was only a divine sense imprint of Empress Luan Xing, so its strength was limited. Fine, if you want to observe, then go ahead. Hua Yongning and Mo Tian both clasped their hands behind their backs. With them keeping an eye on Empress Luan Xing, she wouldn't be able to overturn the heavens and earth. Yang Hao slowly crawled to his feet, his eyes spitting fire. Fuck them, what about me? I was beaten for nothing. Still not going to interrogate? Empress Luan Xing charged at Shen Kuo. Images of the sun, moon and stars surging in her eyes. Her aura was so terrifying that Shen Kuo almost spat blood. His face twitched. Interrogate my ass. Haven't I already stripped Ling Han of his seed status and expelled him from the sect? He thought for a moment and could only reiterate the verdict. Pa. He had just finished speaking when he was sent flying by a slap from Empress Luan Xing. He felt as if all the bones in his body had been broken, and he couldn't even crawl to his feet. I don't approve of this result. Retry the trial. Empress Luan Xing said in an extremely domineering manner. You've gone too far. Hua Yongning and Gao Feng finally couldn't tolerate it anymore. Do you really think this is your chaotic star's majestic empire? Hey, little girl, this is the first time you've acted violently in front of me. I won't lower myself to your level, but you can't do it again. The person you just hit is my disciple. A terrifying voice rang out, causing everyone to tremble from the depths of their souls. This was a suppression on the level of life. Venerable Trinity. Chapter 12-13. Who would have thought that the interrogation of a measly mountain river tier cultivator would actually require an eternal river tier elite to appear? Empress Luan Xing's expression involuntarily changed. She was very powerful, yet she hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier yet, so how could she possibly be a match for an eternal river tier elite? However, her aura wasn't weak either, and she said, Senior, the world is vast, but it's nothing more than reason. These people are in cahoots with each other. They are making up false charges and wronging innocent people. I will not go over. Heh, the matters of the majestic heaven sect are not for a little girl like you to concern yourself with. Venerable Trinity's voice rang out, but he didn't appear. I'm just asking you, why did you injure my disciple? Yang Hao sneered. He had a spiritual sense talisman that Venerable Trinity had given him. As long as he injected his spiritual sense into it, he would be able to contact Venerable Trinity and snitch on him. From this, it could be seen how much Venerable Trinity doted on his new disciple. So what if he was at the heavenly body tier? In front of eternal river tiers, he was nothing more than trash. He dared to hit him, and moreover twice at that. Humph, there was no one who could not pay the price. Empress Luan Xing raised an eyebrow and said, Senior, are you trying to bully the weak? Little girl, don't try to trick me, Venerable Trinity said. Kneel down and apologize to my disciple, and I'll spare you this once. This was a great humiliation. Asking a supreme elite of the heavenly body tier to kowtow and apologize to a sun-moon tier cultivator. Putting aside the fact that Empress Luan Xing was a ruler of a region, even an ordinary heavenly body tier elite wouldn't be able to tolerate such humiliation. Empress Luan Xing's expression changed drastically. She hadn't thought that Venerable Trinity would be so protective of his own people. Was this even reasonable? However, the truth was always in the hands of the strong, and the weak could only resign themselves to adversity. Ha ha ha. Empress Luan Xing chuckled coldly. She only needed one of her 9 doppelgangers to reach the heavenly body tier, and with her experience as well as the support of a vast amount of resources, Hu Feiyun would only need 100 years at most to reach the heavenly body tier. At that time, she would be able to advance into the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier, and then break through to the eternal river tier. For a king tier like her who had cultivated to perfection in every realm, she had the power to surpass 6 stars as soon as she broke through to the next major realm, which was enough for her to battle Venerable Trinity. According to the information they had gathered, Venerable Trinity should be at the late stage of the low extreme of the eternal river tier. But not now. Far from it. Little girl, are you not convinced? Venerable Trinity smiled and said, but there's nothing you can do even if you're not convinced. If he hit you, you should hit him back. But master, he's at the heavenly body tier. I'm no match for him, Yang Hao said respectfully. Haha, don't you still have me? Venerable Trinity said. Thank you, master. A cold smile instantly appeared on Yang Hao's face. Venerable Trinity had already made himself very clear. He wanted him to return the battle to Empress Luanxing. Moreover, with Venerable Trinity suppressing him, how could a mere heavenly body tier cultivator resist? No matter how much of a freakish genius a heavenly body tier was, in front of an eternal river tier elite, they were all like infants. Ling Han's expression changed. If Empress Luanxing had been beaten, even if it was only a clone, this would be a great humiliation. Empress Luanxing wouldn't be able to tolerate it, and he would be even more unable to tolerate it. Come, he shouted loudly. So what if Venerable Trinity was present? He was going to use the Black Tower to draw the Empress into it. This was his future wife, so how could he allow her to be humiliated? At first, Empress Luanxing had only wanted to make a big fuss and win a fair opportunity for Ling Han. Who would have thought that she would lose control and attack Yang Hao? This would draw out Venerable Trinity, making the situation even more dire. She was a decisive person, and she immediately charged toward Ling Han. Hey, you still want to run? Venerable Trinity chuckled. Empress Luanxing's body was instantly restrained, and it was as if she had instantly become a statue. She couldn't move at all. Meanwhile, Yang Hao walked over with a cold smile. He raised his hand high into the air, wanting to slap Empress Luanxing. When he thought about how he would be able to personally take revenge so soon, he couldn't help but feel elated. Of course, this was only a clone of Empress Luanxing. If he had seen Empress Luanxing's true appearance, he probably wouldn't have been so ruthless. However, with Empress Luanxing's pride, she naturally disdained using her appearance to gain sympathy. Shua! Yang Hao lashed out at Empress Luanxing. A figure flashed past and pa! There was a crisp sound. Ling Han was sent flying. He activated the star-plucking step and appeared in front of Yang Hao in time, taking the blow for Empress Luanxing. Although his physique was powerful, that was only at a certain cultivation level. Yang Hao was at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, and his palm strike had broken Ling Han's godly bones. Moreover, he had broken more than one of them. Wah! Ling Han spat out a mouthful of blood. He had suffered a full power strike from a cultivator at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. His vision darkened, and he could faint or even die at any moment. Death had never been so close to him. He forced himself to focus, and refined a drop of indestructible true fluid. Instantly, his body recovered. Venerable Trinity murmured in surprise. He was slightly surprised by Ling Han's astonishing recovery ability. Although Ling Han's pounce and block had also been spectacular, that was only because Venerable Trinity hadn't paid any attention to him. Otherwise, Ling Han wouldn't have been able to perform so well. Meanwhile, Yang Hao's eyes widened. Ling Han had taken a full power strike from him, yet he still hadn't died? So what? That strike had almost killed Ling Han just then. Wouldn't another strike be enough? How could he still be alive and kicking? This guy had to have consumed some kind of natural treasure long ago, which was why he could instantly recover. He chuckled coldly, and his gaze landed on Empress Luanxing again. She had been suppressed by Venerable Trinity, and couldn't resist at all. What pleasure could there be in beating a mountain river tier cultivator? If he wanted to slap someone, he would slap a heavenly body tier cultivator. Only then would it be loud and satisfying. Moreover, she had beaten him to the point of vomiting blood and losing his life essence twice. This was a great enmity. He raised his palm, and once again lashed out at Empress Luanxing. He knew that Ling Han would definitely pounce over to block again, but he didn't care. Toying with him like this was extremely satisfying. Pung! Sure enough, Ling Han used the star-plucking step to block again, and he was once again sent flying. Blood sprayed from all over his body, and his godly bones broke a few more times. This palm strike was even more ferocious. Not only did Yang Hao use the power of the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, but he also used the regulations of heaven and earth of this level. Hundreds of divine patterns appeared, intertwining to form a terrifying killing intent. Ling Han's aura was extremely weak, and he hadn't been killed by this palm strike because his physique was powerful enough. After all, even a cultivator at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier couldn't shatter level 5 godly metal with a single strike. All of you deserve to die, Empress Luanxing said in a stern voice. There was a shocking killing intent in her eyes. When an empress was enraged, heaven and earth would lose color. Her body loosened slightly, and it was as if she were about to break free from Venerable Trinity's control. "Hey, little girl, you're far too naive," Venerable Trinity said with a chuckle. The pressure instantly increased explosively, and Empress Luanxing couldn't even move a finger. Chapter 12:14. Ling Han refined another drop of indestructible true fluid, and his injuries were immediately brought under control. In fact, they were even starting to improve. However, after using 2 drops of indestructible true fluid in such a short period of time, the effects instantly plummeted. The second drop of indestructible true fluid couldn't completely heal his injuries. Instead, it only brought them under control and made them much better. However, they were still some distance away from being completely healed. Even so, this kind of recovery ability still left everyone dumbfounded. It was too shocking. Venerable Trinity's interest was piqued, and he said, "Young man, you're not simple." His standards were extremely high, so someone who could receive praise from him was definitely not simple. Yang Hao couldn't help but feel jealous. He was afraid that Venerable Trinity had also fallen for Ling Han's talent and wanted to take him as his disciple. If that happened, not only would he not be able to take revenge, but he would also gain a powerful enemy. This made him feel very uneasy. Sure enough, Venerable Trinity continued, "Young man, are you willing to take me as your master?" If he had asked Ling Han whether he was willing to take him as his master right from the start, perhaps Ling Han would have responded politely. Even if he didn't sincerely take him as his master, he would at least use this as an excuse to tide over this difficult situation. However, Venerable Trinity had restrained Empress Luanxing and allowed Yang Hao to beat her up. This was something that Ling Han couldn't accept. He had beaten up his future wife, yet he still wanted him to take him as his master? And Yang Hao wanted to become his senior brother? What kind of joke was this? Ling Han chuckled and said, "A teacher must have virtue. Do you think you have the virtue to be a teacher?" Instantly, the surroundings fell silent. Is there something wrong with my ears? Why do I seem to have heard this brat reprimanding Venerable Trinity? Gasp! How audacious! There's actually someone in this galaxy who dares to ask Venerable Trinity if he has virtue in front of him? Is this a joke? How dare you? Hua Yongning and Gao Feng shouted in unison. They had originally disdained to show their might to a mountain river tier cultivator, but this mountain river tier cultivator had insulted their master. As such, they had to step in. Meanwhile, Yang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. In this way, no matter how talented Ling Han was, he wouldn't be accepted as Venerable Trinity's disciple. He couldn't help but think to himself that Ling Han was stupid. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. Before he had enough strength, he was trying to show off his might. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? He was afraid that Venerable Trinity would cherish his talent, so he was the first to rush out and attack Ling Han. He shouted, "You dare to insult my master? You're courting death." He struck out with his palm, which was covered in interweaving divine patterns. This was an attack with all his strength. Kill Ling Han and put an end to all future troubles. Multiple illusory images of giant snakes appeared behind Empress Luanxing. Each of them was tens of thousands of meters tall, and they exuded an ancient and desolate aura. As soon as the snake appeared, Venerable Trinity's restriction on her disappeared. She stretched out her hand and slapped at Yang Hao. Not good. Hua Yongning and Gao Feng hurriedly moved. If they allowed Yang Hao to be killed by Empress Luanxing in front of them, they would definitely suffer a terrible fate. Not only would they have to pay with their lives, but they would also definitely lose Venerable Trinity's favor. At that time, they would no longer have any chance of obtaining the true inheritance of Venerable Trinity. This was something they absolutely could not tolerate. The two heavenly body tier elites moved to intercept Empress Luan Xing. Although they were late, they managed to block Yang Hao's attack in time because they were closer to him. Boom! The three elites clashed. Pung 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 pung. A powerful gust of wind swept out, forming a terrifying shockwave that instantly shattered the palace hall. Pung! Because Yang Hao was closer, he was instantly sent flying by the shockwave. Pa pa pa! Several of his bones were broken. Fortunately, if it weren't for the fact that this was only a shockwave, he would definitely have died. Hua Yongning and Gao Feng were both astonished. They were clearly all at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, so why was there such a huge gap between them? Even when they teamed up, they were almost no match for her. They could conclude that she hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. So why was she so powerful? One had to realize that this was only a divine sense imprint of hers. How powerful would her true body be? Huh? Young lady, you're from the 9 Snake tribe? Xiao. A figure descended from the sky. His entire body was enshrouded in divine light, and it was unclear how tall he was. However, the aura he exuded was incredibly terrifying. Venerable Trinity. This eternal river tier elite had actually appeared. One had to realize that he had only casually attacked from afar, and he had already suppressed Empress Luan Xing. Although she had broken free, he would only need to unleash another attack. However, he had appeared in person. There could only be one reason for this. He had discovered that Empress Luan Xing's identity in the 9 Snake tribe was far too astonishing. Who would have thought that I would be able to meet an ancient divine tribe member in my lifetime? Venerable Trinity said excitedly. His eyes were fixed on Empress Luan Xing, and it was as if flowers had sprouted from her face. Empress Luan Xing's expression froze. Although she had unleashed the power of the 9 Snake tribe and broken free from Venerable Trinity's control, he had only unleashed a casual attack from afar. He hadn't used his full power at all. There was a vast gulf between the heavenly body tier and the eternal river tier. Even her 9 Snake tribe bloodline couldn't bridge this gulf. Moreover, she hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier, and this was only a clone of hers. She couldn't defeat him head-on. So what? She asked calmly as she moved closer to Ling Han. If Venerable Trinity attacked again, she could hide in the Black Tower with Ling Han. Ancient divine tribe. Ha 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 ha. Venerable Trinity roared with laughter, appearing incredibly excited. In fact, the divine light around his body had even faded, revealing a skinny old man. Being able to make the strongest elite of this galaxy lose his composure like this, it was clear how excited he was at this moment. However, the more excited Venerable Trinity was, the more apprehensive Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing felt. This meant that Venerable Trinity was extremely attentive. Master. Yang Hao slowly woke up and struggled to his feet. Although a few of his bones were broken, he could still walk normally with his origin power. In fact, he could still fight, but it would definitely affect his battle prowess. Venerable Trinity ignored him and only stared at Empress Luan Xing, saying, "Young lady, I'll take your bloodline." Sure enough, the old man had been infected by Empress Luan Xing's bloodline. Although he didn't know how he had taken it, this was definitely not good news for Empress Luan Xing. Let's go. Ling Han pounced over, wanting to draw Empress Luan Xing into the Black Tower. Young man, wait at the side. Venerable Trinity didn't even need to move. His divine sense was enough to completely imprison Ling Han. Then he stretched out a hand and grabbed at Empress Luan Xing. Yang Hao was also filled with rage. Since Venerable Trinity had taken Empress Luan Xing, he would vent his anger on Ling Han. Die! He pounced and his fist shot toward Ling Han's head. Ling Han! A voice suddenly traveled over. It was so far away that it seemed to come from the other side of the sky. Ling Han! However, the voice was right next to him. Pung! A figure crashed down from the sky. No one knew how she had appeared, but coincidentally, she landed on Yang Hao's body. She stomped him into the ground, creating a human-shaped crater. Ling Han, Niu Fei is here, the figure called out cheerfully. Chapter 12:16. Didn't they say that Ling Han was a bumpkin who came from the small world? However, the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had stood up for him, and she had even dared to defy Venerable Trinity. This was still acceptable to everyone. Moreover, Empress Luanxing had also been suppressed by Venerable Trinity. There was no doubt about it. However, this mysterious little girl who had descended from the sky was far too ridiculous. Two ultimate elites at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier had been insta-killed with a single strike. If he wasn't an eternal river tier elite, who would believe him? Ling Han actually had such a strong backup by his side. Even Empress Luanxing's heart was pounding. She hadn't imagined that there would be such a terrifying being by Ling Han's side. Although the Notionless Saint was a Genesis tier elite, he had already been dead for who knew how many years, and he had even severed his own saintly might. Right now, he was nothing more than a super tonic that couldn't be of any use in battle. This young girl was obviously very attached to Ling Han. She was completely unreasonable. She only needed one person to be gentle to her, even if she had to slaughter everyone in the world. With such a stubborn infatuation, he would definitely be extremely jealous. Perhaps he would even kill himself. Empress Luanxing was skeptical. This was definitely not impossible. Even Ling Han was shocked. He knew that the Rock Palace was an extremely awesome place that could easily break open a small world and come down. This was something that many great sects could not do. If Hunyo went there, she would definitely advance rapidly. One must know that his cultivation speed was not slow either. No, it wasn't that he wasn't slow. Rather, he was astonishingly fast. In this galaxy, who else could reach the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier before the age of 30? He was certain that the Rock Palace wouldn't let Hunyo run around by herself, and that the old woman in cyan would definitely protect her in secret. That old woman was terrifyingly powerful, so they were at ease to let Hunyo run around. However, he had never imagined that Hunyo would actually be this powerful. She had killed even elites at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier just like that. This kind of cultivation speed was really so fast that he had no friends. Even he had to admit that he was far inferior to her. In front of Hunyo, could he still be called a genius? He was definitely an idiot, and a super idiot at that. Ling Han isn't an idiot. Hunyo seemed to know what Ling Han was thinking. She hugged Ling Han, kissed him on the cheek and said, "Nyo will make Ling Han super powerful." Everyone was speechless. Just a moment ago, this little girl was like a god of death, but now she was like a helpless little bird. No one could believe that they were the same person. However, everyone was even more jealous of Ling Han's luck. What kind of person was this guy? He managed to seduce such a beautiful and shockingly powerful expert. Moreover, this expert was a little girl who could be slowly trained. Just thinking about it made people's noses bleed. Poor Yang Hao. He staggered to his feet. Previously, he had been knocked unconscious by Hunyo's stomp, so he still didn't know what had happened. He only felt that he had been greatly wronged. Today he had actually been knocked unconscious twice. He was the #1 prodigy of the Majestic Heaven sect, and furthermore, he had just been accepted as a disciple by an eternal river tier elite, yet he had suffered such a direct blow to the head. How could he accept this? Boom! Yang Hao's black hair soared into the sky. He was truly enraged, and there were flames burning all around his body. This was a manifestation of his rage taking physical form, and his eyes were fixed on Hunyo. Apart from her, there was no other outsider present. It was clear that she had used some kind of technique to knock him unconscious. He didn't know what it was, but he was unafraid. After all, this was the Majestic Heaven sect. In his fury, he didn't notice that 2 of his senior brothers had already died. Meanwhile, Gao Huang and Hua Yongwen were still wailing and throwing up blood. Right now there was only one thought in his mind: revenge. Holy shit. Did everyone think that he was a pushover? Venerable Trinity finally said. There was a strong sense of caution in his voice. Ling Han was able to kill 2 of his disciples with a single strike. Moreover, he hadn't even been able to determine her exact strength. This caused him to feel apprehensive. Ling Han's cultivation level and strength weren't inferior to his. However, she was far too young. Venerable Trinity didn't think that Hunyo could defeat him. What made him feel more apprehensive was Hunyo's background. Being able to nurture such a young eternal river tier elite. Didn't her sect or clan have to be at the Genesis tier? If a saint was enraged, they could annihilate an entire galaxy with a wave of their hand. Eternal River tier elites were far from enough, let alone Venerable Trinity, who was only at the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. The gap between him and a small saint was enormous. Thus he decided to swallow his anger. Master. Yang Hao felt aggrieved. Why did Venerable Trinity have to stop him? Didn't he see that his handsome face had been trampled into dust? Moreover, how humiliating was it to be trampled into the soil? The people in the surroundings shook their heads furiously. Yang Hao couldn't afford to oppose Ling Han anymore. This guy was a bringer of misfortune. 2 heavenly body tier elites had already died because of him, and there were 2 more at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. It was clear that they wouldn't be able to survive either. If you provoked such a bringer of misfortune, you would definitely be crushed to death. You were merely a disciple of Venerable Trinity. Meanwhile, Ling Han was the lover and man of an Eternal River tier elite. How could you compare to him? Although Yang Hao was infuriated, he didn't dare to disobey Venerable Trinity's orders. He immediately suppressed his anger and stood by his side. However, even if he endured and felt aggrieved, how could Hunyo give up? She actually dared to interrogate her Ling Han. Everyone here deserved to die. Her eyes swept over Empress Luanxing, and there was a similarly murderous look in her eyes. Damn it! She had just captured those bewitching beasts, and now another one had appeared? Fortunately, this bewitching beast was far less beautiful than Nyo. She felt much more at ease. She hadn't seen Empress Luanxing's true appearance yet. Otherwise, she wouldn't have felt so at ease. You dare to be jealous of Nyo's Ling Han? Hunyo decided to start with someone who had committed the most heinous crimes. Thus, she set her sights on Yang Hao and said, Nyo will destroy you. Yang Hao felt that this was hilarious. How great could a little girl who kept mentioning the word Nyo be? She was like a spoiled young mistress who had just come out into the world. However, this spoiled young mistress was far too good. Yang Hao felt that all the beauties he had seen in his life combined could barely compare to this spoiled young girl. His anger was rapidly dissipating. Hunyo attacked. Boom! It was as if the sky had collapsed, and countless meteors fell from the sky. The sky was burning with flames, and the main peak was trembling. It was a scene of destruction. Yang Hao was instantly scared shitless. What fucking cultivation level was this? With a single attack, heaven and earth seemed to collapse, and the universe seemed to be destroyed. Stop! Venerable Trinity finally attacked. His 2 disciples had been killed just then, and he hadn't had the time to attack. After all, even he hadn't expected that Hunyo would be so powerful. However, Yang Hao was his new disciple, and he had high hopes for him. He definitely couldn't die. An Eternal River tier elite attacked. Wang! A silver river surged out from his body, and it was as if it could connect the past and present, elevating his aura to the extreme. Pa pa pa! Everyone in the majestic heaven sect collapsed onto the ground. This aura was far too terrifying, and it formed a suppression of life. Meanwhile, this silver river enveloped Yang Hao, forming the strongest defense in the world. Was even more refreshing. Chapter 12:17. The Milky Way coiled around his body, and there were countless large stars floating within it. An Eternal River tier could crush a heavenly body tier, and this was not just a saying. Just by looking at this galaxy it was clear. There were innumerable great stars, so in terms of power, they naturally could crush a heavenly body tier who knew how many streets. Yang Hao immediately calmed down. With his master taking action, no matter who it was, it would be useless. Wanting to kill him was a joke. However, he was simply too curious. Just who exactly was this young woman? She was simply too powerful for Venerable Trinity to personally act to protect her. He was so young, yet he was already so powerful. If he could marry him, he couldn't help but feel a fire burning in his heart, turning into endless greed. How could he not be moved by her beauty and strength? But just at this moment, Hunyo casually threw out a punch. Pa! The whole galaxy instantly shattered, and all the great stars exploded. Hong hong hong! Brilliant light soared into the sky. What? Yang Hao's lust immediately turned into boundless fear. Venerable Trinity had stepped in to protect him, but his opponent had shattered the Ganges River with a casual punch. This was not a match for him at all. The girl's strength was already like a legend. Hunyao stretched out her hand and picked Yang Hao up. She tilted her head to look at him, and asked curiously, "You're so ugly, yet you still dare to oppose Niu's Ling Han. What an idiot!" Pa! Venerable Trinity fell to the ground on his buttocks. Under the impact of the powerful force, a fissure suddenly appeared on the already tottering main peak, and the fissure extended all the way to the top and the foot of the mountain. Boom! The entire main peak collapsed. This was far too terrifying. Hunyao hadn't targeted him at all. She had merely punched through his defenses. Yet the recoil was so powerful that Venerable Trinity couldn't control himself. He sat down on the ground and shattered a mountain peak. Rumble! The heavens fell and the earth collapsed. However, the people nearby were like stone statues. No matter how the flying stones struck them, none of them felt anything. They were immersed in incomparable shock. In the beginning, everyone thought that Hunyao was at the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier, which was why she was able to knock Yang Hao unconscious with a single stomp. However, when she easily defeated Gao Huang and Hua Yongwen, everyone guessed that she had already advanced to the heavenly body tier. However, Hunyao had killed two elites at the peak stage of the heavenly body tier with a single strike, so everyone's evaluation of her naturally rose to another level. They all thought that she was at the Eternal River tier. But how could this be her true strength? Venerable Trinity fell to the ground with a single punch. He didn't even try to target Venerable Trinity. This was a complete one-sided slaughter. Medium extreme, high extreme, or even consummate level of the Eternal River tier Genesis tier. Genesis tier. Venerable Trinity muttered in a daze. He had seen a battle between a demon master and a saint in the two-realm battlefield, and that was definitely a power that could destroy the world. The sages had the power of creation, while the demon masters had the power of destruction. There was no difference in quality between the two powers. It all depended on who had a deeper grasp of it. Puff! Everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. This girl was actually a saint. The strongest in the world, undefeatable. Damn master. Esteemed lord. Numerous figures flew over. These were the heavenly body tier elites of the majestic heaven sect. This battle was so intense, so if they still couldn't react, then they couldn't be called heavenly body tier elites. But when they arrived, they were all dumbfounded. What the hell? Venerable Trinity sat down on the ground. His hair was disheveled, and he no longer had the air of an immortal. Who could force an Eternal River tier elite into such a miserable state? What's going on? Someone asked in shock. This was also what everyone wanted to know. They didn't dare to ask Venerable Trinity, but they could capture the others and interrogate them. After learning the truth, their faces all paled. If it weren't for the fact that Venerable Trinity was still sitting on the ground, they really wouldn't have believed that there was someone in this galaxy who could defeat Venerable Trinity. How could a Genesis tier saint only have this girl? Her blood and chi were as vigorous as the sea, so she definitely couldn't be any younger. She had to be under 100 years old. However, the majority of super prodigies were only at the Mountain River tier when they were 100 years old. Advancing to the Sun-Moon tier was already considered extremely rare, so what kind of concept was a Genesis tier saint at this age? Pa. With Hunyao's style, she naturally wouldn't care about others. She continuously slapped Yang Hao, and in an instant, his face swelled up like a pig's head. She couldn't help but giggle and said, "Ling Han, doesn't this guy look much more handsome now?" Ling Han laughed and said, "That's right. This is more pleasing to the eye." Hearing Ling Han's praise, Hunyao instantly broke into a smile. She was overjoyed and proudly said, "Of course. Niu's craftsmanship is incredible." Although Yang Hao had been slapped, he hadn't fainted. He looked at Ling Han and then at Hunyao and felt that the heavens really knew how to play tricks on people. How could Ling Han have such a powerful backer? If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have dared to attack Ling Han, even if he had a saint tool. Ling Han had a saint backing him. He hated him. How was he inferior to Ling Han? His talent wasn't weak and his looks were outstanding. Why was such a beautiful, enchanting, and incredibly powerful girl so attached to Ling Han? "I was wrong," he said through gritted teeth. A true man knew when to yield and when to stand tall. As long as he survived this tribulation, He would definitely grit his teeth and cultivate diligently. When he reached the Genesis tier in the future, he would seek revenge for what he had done today. He could be considered a person with a firm will. Otherwise, who would dare to think of seeking revenge against a saint? Just the thought of it would make one shudder in fear. Of course you're wrong, so go and die. Hunyao smiled, and with a flick of her hand Xiao Yonghao was tossed out by her. Pong! A shooting star exploded in the sky, turning into a boundless rain of stars. She had tossed him into the galaxy where he crashed into a shooting star. Even this shooting star had shattered, so it was easy to imagine Yonghao's fate. He would definitely be smashed into smithereens, and not even a scrap would remain. This was the might of a Genesis tier. In the eyes of the spectators, this was like a fantasy. And you, old geezer, Hunyao said. She stretched out a hand to grab Venerable Trinity. Pa! She grabbed Venerable Trinity's neck, and under the terrifying might of her grip, what could an eternal river tear do? He was completely powerless to resist. Only at this moment did everyone truly believe that Hunyao was indeed a Genesis tier. Otherwise, how could she have possessed such strength? To hell with such a young saint. Who are you? Venerable Trinity didn't beg for mercy. How could a Genesis tier be influenced by others? He only wanted to know who he had provoked. Niao is Ling Han's Hunyao. Hunyao tilted her head and said, "Why are you so stupid, old geezer? Aya! No wonder you dared to harm Niao's Ling Han. So you're an idiot." Pa 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 pa. Hunyao began to slap Venerable Trinity. "Detestable old geezer. You actually dared to harm Niao's Ling Han. Thankfully, nothing has happened to Ling Han. Otherwise Niao would be angry." Everyone was speechless. You've already destroyed the majestic heaven sect, and you're still not angry? Then what do you look like when you're angry? Of course no one dared to ask. What a joke. She was a Genesis tier saint. I'm done. Hunyao casually tossed Venerable Trinity aside. She then threw a punch. Pa! Venerable Trinity instantly exploded into pieces. There wasn't even a single bone left. The young girl smiled sweetly. She was pure and innocent, and as beautiful as water. Who else wants to harm Niao's Ling Han? Chapter 12:18. Hunyao's gaze swept by and everyone knelt down, not daring to meet her gaze. They knelt with peace of mind. This was a saint. Little girl, that's enough. Follow me back to the palace. The old woman in cyan appeared. No one noticed how she had appeared. She just stood there very suddenly and naturally, as if she should have been there all along, and no one had noticed. The old woman's aura was not obvious, and she was as ordinary as a normal person. Ling Han knew that this old woman definitely wouldn't let Hunyao appear alone. But what shocked him was that Hunyao had clearly reached the Genesis tier. So why was the old woman still worried? How powerful was the enemy of the Rock Palace that even a saint had to protect her when she was traveling? Could it be that Hunyao was only a small saint now, and the enemy was a saint king? No. Hunyao raised her head like a rattle drum, and leaped over to hug Ling Han tightly. Niao doesn't want to leave Ling Han again. No. The old woman in cyan knocked the cane in her hand heavily. If you stay here, not only will it be dangerous for yourself, but you will also drag this brat down. The old woman finally understood that it was useless to just persuade Hunyao, and she had to include Ling Han as well. Hunyao instantly showed a serious expression, no longer acting shamelessly. Everyone was shocked. From the old woman's tone, it sounded like even Genesis tiers couldn't protect themselves. You know too much. The old woman in cyan revealed a fierce glint, and lightly waved her left hand. Pa pa pa, the people around them were all blasted into a rain of blood. Ling Han reacted quickly, and hurriedly drew Empress Luan Xing into the Black Tower. At this time he really couldn't worry about whether the secret of the Black Tower would be exposed. However, saints could create worlds, open up real space, and create spatial god tools. This shouldn't make the old woman jealous, right? As expected, the old woman in cyan only stared at Ling Han, and said, "Brat, shut your mouth and don't speak nonsense." This old woman was really cruel and merciless. Hunyao's attack could be said to be avenging Ling Han, but for the sake of secrecy, she casually killed over 20 heavenly body tier elites here. She was the one who had let it slip. In fact, it couldn't be said that she had let it slip because she hadn't revealed any secrets at all. These people died too unjustly. Ugly old woman, you dare to threaten Niu's Ling Han. Niu is going to banish you to the border to do hard labor. Hu Niu was furious, and pointed her halberd at the old woman in cyan as she flipped out. The green-clothed old woman was helpless. Who asked this little ancestor to be the successor of the Rock Palace? She thought for a moment and said, I'll give you 3 days. After 3 days you must return with me. Hu Niu's eyes turned and she said, okay. Then she waved her hands. Ugly old woman, leave quickly, you're making me annoyed. The azure-robed old woman snorted, turned around, took a step and disappeared. At this time more figures came from afar. Some were flying in the sky and some were running on the ground. Those were the experts participating in the auction. The commotion here was too great, so they had all put down their auctions and rushed over to check on the situation. Let's go. Hu Niu pulled Ling Han. Xiao, they instantly traveled hundreds of millions of kilometers and disappeared without a trace. When everyone rushed over, they found that this place had already been reduced to ruins. They could faintly sense that the blood here was filled with a powerful aura, so much so that they didn't dare to approach. This made them think of a terrifying possibility, but they didn't dare to believe it no matter what. In this galaxy, could there be anyone who could threaten Venerable Trinity? But the majestic heaven sect had been destroyed, and there were cries of agony everywhere. So where had Venerable Trinity run off to? This became an unsolved mystery. Even tens of millions of years later, no one would know what had happened on this day. Ling Han, did you miss Niu? Ling Han and Hu Niu sat on a rock that looked out at the sea in the distance. The young girl leaned into Ling Han's arms, her face filled with longing. Of course I did. Ling Han smiled and said, I was thinking that I would start looking for you when I reached the Sun Moon tier. I didn't think that you would find me first. Hu Niu instantly giggled and said, you won't be able to find Niu. Why not? Ling Han asked. Hu Niu thought for a moment and said, because Niu is in the celestial realm, and you can't go there yet? What kind of place is the celestial realm? Ling Han asked. Ahem. The old woman in cyan silently appeared, and said, little girl, if you say too much, you will only harm this brat. Fucking spirits are not bad. Hu Niu pouted and said, I know. She inched closer to Ling Han, and said in a low voice, Ling Han, let's make monkeys. Pooh. Ling Han instantly spluttered, and the old woman in cyan was also furious. She said, little girl, if you continue like this, I will kill this brat. You guys are really no fun, just joking. Hu Niu humphed. However, both Ling Han and the old woman in cyan were sure that this girl was definitely not joking. She was completely capable of doing it. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, let's go back first, or else everyone will be worried. It's all your fault, stupid old woman. Hu Niu said in displeasure. She had wanted to take the chance to push Ling Han down and give birth to a son that was even more adorable than Ling Jianshui. Unexpectedly, the stupid old woman didn't keep her word, and had been following them in secret. The old woman in cyan humphed coldly. She had to admit that it was not easy for Ling Han to cultivate to his current cultivation level in such a short time, but to say that he was worthy of the palace mistress of the Rock Palace, he was really too far off. Completely not the slightest possibility. Ling Han and Hu Niu went to the Mo clan establishment. Ling Han, Shui Yinyu and the others immediately came out to greet them. They had all heard about the major event that had just happened in the majestic heaven sect, and were naturally worried about Ling Han. Now that they saw that he was fine, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Shui Yinyu wanted to throw herself into Ling Han's arms, but she had just pounced when she was picked up by Hu Niu, who said murderously, Ling Han, this bewitching woman wants to assassinate you, so Niu will kill her for you. Nonsense. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head. This little girl's jealousy was still as strong as before. Hu Niu couldn't help but pout, her eyes darting around. When she left, she definitely had to take this bewitching woman with her, so how could she feel at ease staying by Ling Han's side? Hu Niu. Feng Peyun, Mu Rongqing and Helian Tianyun all exclaimed in surprise. They had seen Hu Niu leave with their own eyes, and had not thought that she would suddenly appear. Hu Niu was cold and indifferent. In her eyes there was only Ling Han, and she did not take anyone else to heart. So she's Hu Niu. Ding Ping was surprised. He had heard his master and several senior uncles mention Hu Niu before. Wow, what a beautiful girl. The old ginseng had also run over long ago, and when he saw Hu Niu, he couldn't help but drool. This girl was really too beautiful. His lust had reached the sky, and he immediately pounced on Hu Niu, saying, "Little girl, let Grandpa Ginseng check how your development is." Chapter 12:20. Who would have thought that the once invincible majestic heaven sect would collapse in a single day? Venerable Trinity had disappeared, and so had the 24 heavenly body tier elites. It was hard to believe that they weren't dead. Although the majestic heaven sect said that they didn't want to be the overlord, the presence of an eternal river tier elite would naturally affect the entire galaxy. Now that all the elites of the majestic heaven sect had disappeared in a single day, this would naturally cause chaos in the galaxy. A long-awaited super war would erupt, and even planets would invade other planets, not just one continent. However, in such a war, true elites would also stand out. How could a supreme prodigy emerge from a pool of stagnant water? The original disciples of the majestic heaven sect naturally all returned to their respective sects, and went to find their mothers. Ling Han temporarily stayed on the flying cloud planet. The Mo clan was using all kinds of connections to help him search for the whereabouts of the 5 sects, but this needed time. However, Ling Han had to first break through to the Sun Moon tier before he could set out. Thus there was no need for him to rush. Hu Niu told Ling Han some secrets of martial art, such as the use of mountains and rivers, the sun and moon, and the stars. These weren't just used to store power, but could also be used to suppress opponents. In fact, they could even form their own world. For example, releasing mountains and rivers could trap opponents in this area, and the sun, moon, and stars would undoubtedly be more powerful. The level of martial art in this galaxy was too low, so the development of the treasuries of cultivators was naturally very backward. Otherwise, this would be impossible in a higher-level galaxy. So my battle prowess can still increase a lot, Ling Han muttered. After suppressing his cultivation level, he battled with Ding Ping, Feng Peyun, and the others. Everyone's cultivation level was the same, but after Ling Han released his mountain and river domain and suppressed them, his battle prowess instantly soared. Because it was equivalent to fighting in his own world, every movement was naturally within his grasp, and he could also endlessly influence his opponents. Now, even if millions of mountain river tier elites ganged up on me, I could still divide them and defeat them one by one. In terms of developing one's own potential, this galaxy is practically still in the primitive stage. However, Venerable Trinity has clearly released the Ganges River to form a silver river to protect Yonghao. Presumably, he learned this secret art while fighting in the two-realm battlefield. But he didn't teach it to his inner disciples. Perhaps only his true disciples can inherit this secret technique. Ling Han was not the kind of person to keep his secrets to himself. Although he was not generous enough to pass on this secret technique to everyone, Feng Peyun, Mu Rongqing, Ding Ping, and the others had all received his selfless teachings. Moreover, Hu Feiyun had naturally also been taught this technique. Since she knew it, that meant that Empress Luanxing had also learned it. As for whether the Empress would teach it to others or not, Ling Han didn't care either. This was just a trick to use the mountains, rivers, the sun, the moon, and the stars. It was not a secret. Several days later, the Chaotic Stars' majestic empire sent a starship to receive the cultivators of their empire. Hu Feiyun, Li Weiwei, and the others all set off on their way back. At first, Ling Han had wanted to kill Zhao Luan, but this guy had actually slipped away quickly, and had already returned to the joint peace planet on a merchant ship. Feng Peyun, Mu Rongqing, and the others didn't return to the joint peace planet. They wanted to search for the 5 sects with Ling Han. They had all come from a small world, so they naturally wouldn't forget the sins that the 5 sects had committed. Everyone was cultivating with all their might. Once they found out the galaxy where the 5 sects were, they would rush over. At that time, a bloody battle would be unavoidable. Of course, the stronger everyone was, the better. Because the Leviathan of the majestic heaven sect had fallen, the 2 overlords of the flying cloud planet, the 4 seas majestic empire and the great heaven majestic empire, finally rose, invading the territory that had originally belonged to the majestic Heaven sect. Naturally, a great battle was unavoidable. However, this had nothing to do with Ling Han. He guarded his own territory, and used the Mo clan establishment to obtain a vast amount of level 4 godly metal for him to raise the level of his divine demon sword. Before setting off to search for the 5 sects, he had 2 goals. The first was to break through to the Sun Moon tier, and the second was to raise the level of his divine demon sword to level 5. He had already cultivated to the pinnacle of the Mountain River tier, but breaking through to the Sun Moon tier wasn't something that could be done overnight. This required accumulation, not just accumulation of comprehension of cultivation level, but also accumulation of origin power. Advancing from the Mountain River tier to the Sun Moon tier was too big of an increase. Thus, it also required a lot of accumulation. Otherwise, if he forcefully broke through, he would only be sucked dry. As Ling Han accumulated, he also prepared godly medicines for himself. If he didn't have enough accumulation, he could still rely on a vast amount of godly medicines to replenish it. At the very least, he wouldn't have to suck his life essence dry. That would be too tragic. He didn't even have time to cultivate alchemy. Basically, he sat under the reincarnation tree every day, tempering his Mountain River tier to perfection while exploring the great Tao of the Sun Moon tier. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. To immortals, half a year was like the blink of an eye, but to Ling Han and the others it was more than 100 years of comprehension. Ling Han already had enough confidence that he could break through to the Sun Moon tier. And it was at this moment that the Mo clan finally sent him a piece of good news. They had found the location of the 5 sects. The Cloud Apex planet was located in the Long Light Galaxy, and was about 200 years away from the Flying Cloud planet. This was an extremely long distance. Otherwise, the Mo clan wouldn't have taken so long to find out. They had also used merchants from galaxy to galaxy, and finally found out the location of the 5 sects. Thankfully, Who Knew had modified the cloud-piercing shuttle, and its speed was who knew how many times faster than ordinary starships. Moreover, it was also embedded with a star pattern formation, so there was no need to worry about getting lost in the galaxy. It would take about 2 years. Very good. Ling Han began to break through to the Sun Moon tier. A mere 7 days later he opened a brand new door. A red sun appeared in his dantian, and the heavenly tribulation also responded, immediately rolling over. Ling Han began the painful process again. He shattered his own godly bones, and tempered them under the heavenly tribulation, causing them to rise to the next level. Meanwhile, auctioning off the 4 drops of Thousand Source True Fluid, and a large number of ancient pill recipes also allowed Ling Han to accumulate a vast amount of wealth. Not only did he pay off his old debts, but he also had a large amount of wealth left. Now he exchanged all of it for level 4 godly metal, which he fed to the divine demon sword. At this moment, Ling Han finally allowed the divine demon sword to swallow the last piece of level 4 godly metal, and it reached a level of qualitative change, also advancing toward level 5. The man and the sword experienced the heavenly tribulation together. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Lightning intertwined, creating a terrifying scene. Ling Han was reduced to a pile of shattered bones, and a series of cracks actually appeared on the divine demon sword. However, it didn't shatter. Instead, it continuously expelled metal shards from its body. Those were shards, useless trash. This divine sword seemed to have developed its own intelligence, and was actively evolving toward a level of perfection. The lightning turned into rain, completely blocking Ling Han and the divine demon sword. Brilliant light illuminated the galaxy. Chapter 12:21. Ling Han endured the heavenly tribulation, tempering his true self in the heavenly lightning, and increasing his comprehension of the great Tao. Heavenly tribulation represented the strongest killing intent of the great Tao of heaven and earth. If he could comprehend such a great Tao, it would greatly increase his battle prowess. Ling Han was comprehending his own Tao. He had already grasped the embryonic form of the lightning sword technique, but this name did not live up to its name. It was only because this sword technique possessed the characteristics of speed and great destructive power that he named it the lightning sword technique. If it could also fuse with the power of heavenly lightning, then the lightning sword technique would live up to its name. How fast was heavenly lightning? What if it could also possess such characteristics? Though Ling Han had turned into dust, his divine sense was still stable. Under the tempering of the indestructible heaven scroll, his divine sense was incredibly tough. Even if it left his body and turned into a ball of light, it would not be damaged by the heavenly tribulation. The strength of his divine sense had actually reached the level above the low extreme of the sun-moon tier, and below the medium extreme. Thus, the power of lightning at the early stage of the sun-moon tier naturally could not hurt him. In the heavenly tribulation, he could better comprehend the power of lightning and directly understand its essence. Unfortunately, the heavenly tribulation comes too rarely, and it doesn't last long enough. Ling Han thought, but he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. I can only endure a few heavenly tribulations by myself, but can't I use the heavenly tribulation of others to endure it? If I can grasp the technique of lightning, then whether it is the might of my sword technique or my movement technique, they will all be greatly improved. Half a day later, the sky full of thunderclouds dissipated, and Ling Han channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid. His body immediately recovered, and he also felt an obvious change in his body. Sun-moon tier. His power was at least 1,000,000 times stronger than before he had endured the heavenly tribulation. As expected, this is a huge threshold. After crossing it, my power that could surpass 10 stars is now only 6 stars. If I want to regain the power of surpassing 10 stars, I must cultivate to the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier. However, only those who have cultivated to the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier can have the power of 6 stars before the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier. Furthermore, they have to reach the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. If it's an ordinary mountain river tier cultivator, they can at most possess a power surpassing 4 stars. Only by cultivating to the pinnacle level would they be able to surpass 4 stars, and their achievements in the pinnacle level would also range from 4 stars to 6 stars in power. My current power is comparable to the late stage of the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier. However, this is only power. In terms of my grasp of the regulations of heaven and earth, I'm still at the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. Thus, even if I use some secret techniques, my battle prowess will only surpass 6 or 7 stars. Therefore, people say that 5-star geniuses only exist in legends. Although this is a bit exaggerated, it is actually very reasonable because there are too few people who have reached the pinnacle state. Ling Han was startled and said, "Small tower, why hasn't the black tower changed?" He had broken through a major tier, so why hadn't the black tower opened up a new layer so that all 5 elements were present? You still have to rise another tier. It was rare for small tower to give a clear boundary. What? Ling Han almost jumped in fright. I have to reach the heavenly body tier to open the 5th level? Doesn't that mean that I can only open the 7th level when I reach the Genesis tier? Wrong. If you reach the Genesis tier, you can only open the 6th level, Small Tower said seriously. Ling Han was stunned. Then there are still 3 levels, and they can only be opened at the level of the celestial realm. Small Tower swayed back and forth. This was its nod. So, you have to cultivate as soon as possible. When the black tower is completely opened, I can also recover all my memories. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "In that case, your memories haven't been destroyed, but rather sealed." "Perhaps," Small Tower said calmly. Small Tower said calmly, "Young man, work hard on your cultivation and think about it. If you make another breakthrough above the Genesis tier, you will be able to enter into the celestial realm, and in my vague memories, the people in the celestial realm should all have eternal life." What? Ling Han was shocked. The elites of the celestial realm actually had an unlimited lifespan? Then how powerful would this celestial realm be? Elites could continue to cultivate like this for billions, trillions of years, becoming stronger and stronger. No wonder there was a precious treasure like the reincarnation tree. Even Genesis tiers couldn't wait for 12 trillion years, but the elites of the celestial realm could. However, you don't have to be discouraged. Though the elites of the celestial realm have an unlimited lifespan, they still have heaven's decline. If they can't survive it, they will still be killed, Small Tower said calmly. Unlimited lifespan doesn't mean eternal indestructibility. Ling Han nodded. The original owner of the Black Tower should be an elite of the celestial realm, but didn't he still die? Young man, run towards the morning sun. Small tower said. Ling Han was speechless. He discovered that this tool spirit was becoming more and more black-bellied. He returned to the small town. Since he had already passed the heavenly tribulation and advanced into the sun-moon tier, he should also set off for the cloud apex planet. However, Feng Peyun and the others broke through one after another, so Ling Han could only slow down and set off after this tide of breakthrough passed. Feng Peyun and Mu Rongqing both advanced into the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, while Helian Tianyun was one level ahead, advancing into the high extreme, and Ding Ping was the most exaggerated, reaching the consummate level. If word of this got out, it would definitely scare people to death. It had only been a few short years, so how could there be such a frightening rate of improvement? But it should be known that with Ling Han's endless supply of alchemical pills to increase the accumulation of origin power, and with the reincarnation tree to comprehend Tao, if they still could not achieve such astonishing advancement, then would Feng Peyun and the others still have the right to be called prodigies? Ling Han did not remain idle either. When they passed the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han would freeload along. For others, this was practically seeking death. Of all things, he actually freeloaded on the heavenly tribulation. But for Ling Han, he no longer needed to shatter his godly bones to temper himself. He only needed to observe the power of the heavenly tribulation, so he naturally did not need to suffer at all. He only needed to quietly study. After passing the 4 heavenly tribulations, Ling Han cultivated in seclusion under the reincarnation tree for 3 days. When he opened his eyes, there was actually a flash of lightning. Compared to the lightning technique that I have grasped now, the thunderclap 9th heaven is practically trash. Ling Han shook his head. After all, the thunderclap 9th heaven was only the lowest level cultivation technique of the immortal realm, but the heavenly tribulation was derived from the great Tao of heaven and earth, so how could it compare? As my cultivation level becomes higher and higher, the heavenly tribulation that I pass will naturally become more and more powerful. Then the power of lightning that I have grasped will also become stronger and stronger. With heaven and earth as my teacher, I will create my own Tao. Ling Han's gaze was determined. The path that he wanted to walk was becoming clearer and clearer. Since everyone had passed the heavenly tribulation, it was impossible for them to break through again in a short period of time. So Ling Han decided to set out. However, he had not set out yet, and unexpectedly encountered someone who was seeing him off. Empress Luanxing. It was not a clone, but rather her main body. "You're leaving?" she asked. Her beautiful face was shrouded in primal chaos, and her tone was calm. There was not the slightest fluctuation in her voice. Being strong enough to reach the heavenly body tier, she naturally could control her emotions very well. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "At first, I wanted to go to Joint Peace Planet to say goodbye to you, but I did not think that you would come." Chapter 12:22. Empress Luanxing dispersed the aura of chaos on her face, revealing her peerless beauty that could wreak havoc in the world, especially her enchanting charm. Even Hunyou's beauty was not inferior to hers, but in terms of charm, she was far inferior. After all, Hunyou was still young, and her charm was not yet developed, so she might not lose to her in the future. But now, Empress Luanxing was definitely the #1 troublemaker, no one else. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This troublemaker was really never tired of it. Furthermore, when he was with her, he would naturally forget everyone else, and only her could be tolerated. This was the charm of an empress. "I want to ask you some things," she said solemnly. "Hehe. Why are you so serious with me?" Ling Han said with a smile, and his eyes glanced down slightly. "Are you being disobedient, and want to be taught a lesson?" Empress Luanxing knew where he was staring at, and couldn't help but feel embarrassed and annoyed. Although it wasn't her, the main body, who had been spanked, it was her divine sense that was in control, so she naturally felt the same. Now that Ling Han deliberately stared at her, she felt her face burn, and couldn't help but blush. "Taking liberties with me, aren't you afraid that I will suppress you?" she humphed, fully displaying the domineering nature of an empress. Ling Han coughed, clasped his hands and said, "Greetings, Empress. Too insincere." Empress Luanxing casually raised a hand and said, "Forget it, I have something to ask you. After hearing her say this twice, Ling Han also became serious. Though this empress was extremely charming, it was clear that she was an extremely thin-skinned person. She would not be able to withstand any teasing at all. His relationship with her was not so good that it was as if they were deeply in love, so it was best to stop before going too far. What do you want to ask? He asked. Celestial realm. Empress Luanxing said. Her pretty face having a complicated expression, there was loneliness and anger. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, then enter the Black Tower and call Small Tower. Empress Luanxing couldn't help but pause. Entering the Black Tower, everything was under Ling Han's control. She had been spanked last time, and she still had lingering fears. Ling Han's face darkened and he said, am I that kind of vile person? Empress Luanxing didn't reply, but her expression clearly said yes. Damn, Ling Han sat on the ground and said, all right then. If you don't trust me, don't go in and cultivate in the future. Humph. This world belongs to me, and everyone belongs to me. Everything that belongs to you belongs to me. It's just that I'm allowing you to possess them, Empress Luanxing said proudly. So, don't be mistaken. Looking at her proud appearance, Ling Han couldn't help but feel an itch in his heart. This gave him an incomparably strong desire to conquer her. The charm of this stunner seemed to have increased a little. Ling Han resisted the urge and said, forget it, let's not talk about this. Are you related to the immortal region? Empress Luanxing hesitated slightly before saying, my ancestors came from the celestial realm. What? Ling Han was shocked. He suddenly clapped his hands and said, I know. Ancient divine tribes, are they all from the celestial realm? Empress Luanxing nodded. That's right. The ancient divine tribes were all exiled from the celestial realm to the immortal realm. Because they have the bloodline of the celestial realm, they are relatively stronger. Ling Han looked at Empress Luanxing in surprise. He had just mentioned the celestial realm, and now a descendant of the celestial realm came out. He said solemnly, you said, exiled? The exact year can't be determined. There was a war in the celestial realm that affected the whole celestial realm. In that war, many elites died, and after the war ended, the losing side was all exiled from the celestial realm, Empress Luanxing said. Ling Han's heart thumped. This was definitely a shocking secret. Then do you want to return to the celestial realm? He asked. Empress Luanxing nodded slowly. Returning to the celestial realm is the belief of the 9 snake tribe, passed down from generation to generation. She looked at Ling Han and continued, that little girl should be the successor of some great sect in the celestial realm. She was referring to Tigress. Rock Palace, Ling Han said. It has been too long, and only bits and pieces of the tribe's records about the celestial realm are left. Empress Luanxing sighed. In the ancestral land of the 9 snake tribe, there is a 9 snake pool. Every disciple of the 9 snake tribe needs to bathe in it to fully activate their bloodline. For the 9 snake tribe, this is the most important inheritance. So, the most important reason for you to return to the celestial realm is to retrieve the 9 snake pool? Ling Han asked. I can't. Empress Luanxing shook her head. The 9 snake pool is formed from the remains of the ancestor of the 9 snake tribe. And the remains of the ancestor are buried in the ancestral land. They have already become one with the mountains, and cannot be moved. So, if the 9 snake tribe wants to regain its glory, they can only return to the ancestral land, Ling Han said. Yes. A desolate expression appeared on Empress Luanxing's face. However, I am the only one left of the 9 snake tribe now. Don't worry. Ling Han reached out to place a hand on Empress Luanxing's shoulder. In the future we will have many children and strengthen the 9 snake tribe. Pa! His hand was sent flying by Empress Luanxing before he could even touch her. He gritted his teeth in pain. This empress was at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and a casual slap from her was enough to break his bones. Don't be so talkative. Empress Luanxing chided. Ling Han snickered. If it had been any other man who dared to tease the empress like this, he would probably have been reduced to ashes by now. However, only his hand had been sent flying, which meant that he was still in the empress's heart. She had fought with an eternal river tier elite for his sake previously. Sharp tongue, soft heart, I like it. Ling Han nodded and solemnly said, "We will charge into the celestial realm together." Empress Luanxing pondered for a moment, and then said, "I don't know what you want to do, but be careful on your journey." "Don't worry, I will definitely return safe and sound," Ling Han said. "The celestial realm, what kind of place is that?" "In the legendary celestial realm, elites can possess eternal lifespan," Empress Luanxing said. "Eternal existence, once conflict arises, it is indeed impossible to resolve," Ling Han thought. These people had lived for too long, so they would naturally have nothing better to do after eating their fill, and would think of all sorts of nonsense. Moreover, generation after generation of old people could not die, so conflicts would only intensify, and ultimately develop into war. Then, since a war had erupted, there could possibly be a second and third war. The celestial realm was not necessarily a celestial realm. "Don't worry about your great Ling Empire. I will guard it for you," Empress Luanxing continued. Then with a wave of her sleeves she said, "I am leaving." "Wait," Ling Han called out. Empress Luanxing stopped and turned around, a questioning look on her face. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "This farewell will definitely be many years later before we can meet again. Won't you give me a hug?" Empress Luanxing instantly rolled her eyes at him, and the aura of primal chaos enveloped her beautiful face again. She spat out a single word, "Scram." Chapter 1224. After knowing the exact location of the 5 sects, Ling Han and the others immediately set off. After half a month, Ling Han had gained new insights on the refinement of the spiritual rainbow developing pill. He didn't start refining it, but meditated to make up for his shortcomings. He believed that if he started the furnace again, not only would he be able to guarantee success, but he would also improve greatly. They entered the territory of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, traveled for another 5 days, and arrived at the Wuxia mountain where the Cloud Phoenix sect was located. This was naturally to find the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden first, and then figure out how to overthrow the 5 sects. Though the actions of the 5 sects were definitely not allowed in the immortal realm, the lower realm had already opened the sky and arrived in the immortal realm, so there was naturally no evidence. How could they prove that the 5 sects had once refined the living beings of a small world into alchemical pills? Therefore, Ling Han naturally would not take the path of complaining. Instead, he would use his own hands to overthrow the 5 sects. This was even more satisfying. "I wonder what is the cultivation of Sword Emperor and Setting Sun Saber Emperor," Ling Han said in his heart. This was an existence that he could only look up to in the past, but in the immortal realm, even the Sword Emperor and the others might not be qualified to be called geniuses. Perhaps they would still be able to maintain their astonishing talent in the immortal world and dazzle the world. He suppressed his competitive heart and came to a small town at the foot of Wuxia Mountain. This small town was built on the Cloud Phoenix sect, and there were martial artists everywhere. Some of them were here to acknowledge a master, some were here to entrust the Cloud Phoenix sect with some matters, to solve some problems that they could not solve themselves, some were here to pay a visit, and some were here to do business. In short, whether a faction was prosperous or not could be determined by the development and liveliness of its affiliated towns. If it was so deserted that no one visited it, then the faction would naturally not be strong. According to this, the Cloud Phoenix sect was still living quite comfortably. Ling Han and his brothers, as well as Ding Ping and Helian Tianyun, stayed here for a few days discreetly asking around, but to their disappointment, there was no news of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's whereabouts. Not only was there no news of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's whereabouts, even the Sword Emperor, the Setting Sun Saber Emperor, and the others had no clues. Yes, Ling Han clapped his hands. The Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor lived up to their names in the small world, but would they still dare to call themselves that in the immortal realm? If you call yourself the Emperor, where does that put the Crimson Flames Emperor? In that case, they must have changed their nickname. Ling Han naturally knew of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's name, but this name was extremely strange. Back then, in order to find out about this name, he had even used the excuse of helping her concoct alchemical pills to half joke and half coerce the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. It was also after that time that he was targeted by the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and it seemed like he had greatly offended her. Moreover, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden had also warned him that he definitely couldn't reveal her name to anyone else. Then how do we find them? Ling Han was in a dilemma. After thinking for a while, he decided to find 4 disciples first. In his mind, when the 5 sects descended 10,000 years ago, it should have been the heavenly phoenix divine maiden who had brought his 4 disciples to the immortal realm. Then, as long as he found his 4 disciples, he would naturally be able to find out where the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was now. Let's do that. Thus he decided to inquire about the whereabouts of Jiang Yufeng, Chen Ruijing, Yun Yongwang and Kang Xiao Yuan. Soon he obtained some information. Yun Yongwang and Kang Xiao Yuan were quite famous now, and they were the 2 management alchemists of the Hanlin Pavilion. Hanlin Pavilion, flipping the 2 words Hanlin, wasn't it Ling Han? Come, let's go to Big Trade City. The Hanlin Pavilion was located in Big Trade City, and Big Trade City was only a 2-day journey from Qixia Mountain. It was also the nearest large city to the Cloud Phoenix sect. They arrived very quickly, and found out after making some inquiries. This Hanlin Pavilion had only risen to prominence a few thousand years ago, but it was developing better and better recently. The 2 management alchemists had both broken through to level 5, and their natural talent was very shocking. Being able to break through to level 5 meant that their martial art tier had to have reached the Sun Moon tier as well. Otherwise, the power of their divine sense would not be enough to support the refinement of level 5 divine pills. Apart from a very few special cases, their divine sense was incredibly powerful. Ling Han nodded internally. The improvement of his 2 disciples was quite impressive. Because they specialized in alchemy, they could still advance from the Shattering Void tier to the Sun Moon tier in 10,000 years. This improvement was very shocking, as expected of his disciples. Because this also involved his last life, Ling Han had Feng Peyun by a courtyard in the city to stay. Then, they could go their separate ways, training while gathering information about the 5 sects. To them, the 5 sects were still colossal entities. Furthermore, this was an imperial empire, and there were extremely many heavenly body tier elites. Even eternal river tiers were counted in the 10s or even 100s. Who knew if the 5 sects had a powerful backer? Revenge was a must, but he definitely could not throw his life away as well. Ling Han walked slowly. This big trade city was also a city where humans and demonic beasts lived next to each other, giving him an urge to capture the demonic beasts that were walking beside him and make them into a delicious feast. He secretly cursed at his sins. A glutton's nature was hard to change. After a while, he arrived at the Hanlin Pavilion. So many people. At the entrance there were 3 layers of people inside and 3 layers of people outside, so that not even water could pass through. Ling Han couldn't help but feel strange. This business was too good, wasn't it? Buying an alchemical pill was crowded to this extent. He heard the discussions of the people beside him, and finally realized that it wasn't that the Hanlin Pavilion's business was so good, but rather that someone was challenging them. The other party was an alchemist from the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and said that he wanted to spar with the Hanlin Pavilion in alchemy. That was what they said, but everyone was very clear that the Treasure Forest Pavilion was here to cause trouble and suppress the Hanlin Pavilion's momentum. That was because the Treasure Forest Pavilion was originally the largest alchemical merchant in Big Trade City, but now the Hanlin Pavilion was rising strongly. Though it was far from threatening the position of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, there were signs of it. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was a colossal entity, and the Treasure Forest Pavilion in Big Trade City was only a branch. It was said that this alchemical merchant was spread throughout the entire imperial empire and controlled astonishing wealth and power. Even the Crimson Flames Emperor had to give them some respect. Thus, now that an alchemist from the Treasure Forest Pavilion had come to cause trouble, naturally no one was good for the Hanlin Pavilion. Lost again. A cry of surprise came from the front of the crowd. Everyone shook their heads. As it turned out, the Hanlin Pavilion had already lost 4 matches in a row. Ling Han squeezed his way forward. What kind of power was he now? He only needed to circulate his Sun Moon tier power slightly, and he easily squeezed his way to the front. This was already the interior of the Hanlin Pavilion, and there was a very large space in the center. There were 2 pill furnaces placed there, and the people from both sides were clearly standing behind 1 pill furnace each. Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiu Yuan. Ling Han immediately discovered his 2 disciples. 10,000 years had passed, yet their appearances hadn't changed much. They only appeared calmer and more mature. We've competed for half a month and you've also lost 4 matches in a row. It'll be the same even if we compete for a 5th match, an elder in his 60s said with a faint smile. He appeared to be brimming with confidence. In the past half a month, the Treasure Forest Pavilion had won completely in terms of refining level 1 divine pills all the way to level 4 divine pills. Not necessarily. Yun Yongwang humphed. He then turned to Kong Xiu Yuan and said, "Third, you or me?" "Me." Kong Xiu Yuan stepped forward. Chapter 12:25. Although the Hanlin Pavilion had already lost 4 matches in a row, it was like a sect competing in martial arts. The 4 Mountain River tier cultivators could lose all their matches, but the Sun Moon tier cultivators could win 1 match. It was the same for alchemy. The Hanlin Pavilion had 2 level 5 alchemists. Thus, if they wanted to completely suppress the Hanlin Pavilion, they had to defeat these 2 level 5 alchemists. Of course, their previous victories weren't in vain. It proved that the Treasure Forest Pavilion was superior to the Hanlin Pavilion in terms of level 1 to level 4 alchemists. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was indeed quite ruthless. They wanted to deal a heavy blow to the entire Hanlin Pavilion. Thus, if people wanted to purchase alchemical pills, they would definitely consider the Treasure Forest Pavilion first. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the quality of their pills was higher. Every pill was 30% poisonous. One couldn't eat too many pills. Thus, when the quantity was limited, they would definitely choose the higher quality pills. Thus, as long as the Treasure Forest Pavilion defeated the 2 level 5 alchemists of the Hanlin Pavilion, the Treasure Forest Pavilion would naturally win this match. Moreover, this match was being held in public, and it had been going on for half a month. Who in the city didn't know about this? Kong Xiu Yuan walked down and asked, "Who wants to compete with me?" "I'll go." A middle-aged man walked out. His appearance wasn't very impressive, but his body exuded a strong medicinal scent. This was the result of working with alchemical pills and medicinal ingredients for many years. "Liang Jinbo," Kong Xiu Yuan said in a deep voice. "Hey, you recognize me?" the middle-aged man asked. Kong Xiu Yuan chuckled and said, "I've long heard of Grandmaster Liang's great name. I heard that Grandmaster Liang was already a level 5 alchemist 100,000 years ago. You're probably not far from level 6 now, right?" Liang Jinbo revealed a proud expression. Alchemy was just like martial art. Every step forward was incredibly difficult. Even though he had already been a level 5 alchemist 100,000 years ago, he was still at this cultivation level now. One had to know how long it took to advance from the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier to the medium extreme. Those with better talent would need 400,000 to 500,000 years. Thus, he only needed 100,000 years to become a level 6 alchemist. This was actually very impressive. He was completely worthy of being called a prodigy. "Kong Xiu Yuan, you're also a prodigy of alchemy. Why don't you take the Hanlin Pavilion and join our Treasure Forest Pavilion?" Liang Jinbo offered. Kong Xiu Yuan shook his head and said, "The Hanlin Pavilion is the blood, sweat, and tears of us brothers. We definitely won't let it collapse." "Haha, then I have nothing to say." Liang Jinbo extended his hand. "Let's compete. Please." Liang Jinbo paused for a moment then said, "Since it's my side who is challenging you, and I'm older than you by many years, so I can be considered half a senior, then let me decide what pill to refine first." There was a huge difference because even though they were both 5th-tier medicinal pills, there was still a difference in difficulty. Those who chose first would be at a disadvantage, while those who chose later could calmly make adjustments according to their own strength. Kong Xiu Yuan didn't try to show off. It was true that the other party had more than 100,000 years of experience in alchemy than him, so he didn't have much of an advantage. "I'll concoct the 4 directions elixir," Liang Jinbo said in a deep voice after some consideration. Kong Xiu Yuan was slightly astonished. The 4 directions elixir was one of the more difficult pills to refine even among level 5 pills. Thus, if he wanted to defeat his opponent, he would definitely have to choose a more difficult pill. Of course, he could also choose an easier pill, and then hope that Liang Jinbo would make a mistake and explode. Then, he would only need to concoct a level 5 pill to win. But if Ling Han wasn't confident, why would he say that he wanted to concoct the 4 directions elixir at a time like this? He pondered for a moment and then said, "Then I'll concoct the 4 directions elixir as well." Both of them were concocting the 4 directions elixir, so the competition was even simpler. Whoever could concoct more pills in a cauldron would naturally be the winner. Moreover, if the number of pills was the same, they could also compare the quality of the pills. Then let's begin. Both of them first prepared their materials. The treasure forest pavilion had come prepared, so they naturally had brought their materials with them. Moreover, Kong Xiu Yuan was the owner of this place, so he naturally chose his materials very quickly. After a short while, the two of them said to begin, and then began to concoct pills. They sorted out and refined the materials and then started a fire. Soon, the two of them entered the most crucial stage of concoction. Ling Han only pondered for a moment, and then shook his head. With his eyesight as the alchemy emperor, he could already tell that Kong Xiu Yuan was no match for Liang Jinbo. Kong Xiu Yuan's talent in alchemy was indeed not inferior to Ling Han's. In fact, it was even superior. Unfortunately, Ling Han had been a level 5 alchemist for 100,000 years more than him. This was a very, very large gap. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he walked towards Yun Yong Wang. "Stop!" The members of the Han Lin Pavilion hurriedly blocked a young man's path upon seeing him walk over so boldly. Yun Yong Wang also walked over upon hearing this. After meeting Ling Han's eyes, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and say, "Have we met before?" This person's eyes gave him a sense of déjà vu. Moreover, there were far too many complicated emotions contained in his eyes. Ling Han lowered his gaze slightly, and said with a smile, "I want to join the Han Lin Pavilion. Is that okay?" Yun Yong Wang was astonished. This young man actually wanted to join the Han Lin Pavilion. Didn't he see that the Han Lin Pavilion was in a very bad situation right now? Yet, he actually wanted to join. Strange. He asked, "You're also an alchemist?" Ling Han broke into a smile and replied, "I've studied for a few years." "Only a few years?" Yun Yong Wang pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "All right." A person's heart was revealed in times of crisis. Ling Han actually wanted to join the Han Lin Pavilion at this time. It was like sending charcoal in snowy weather, and it made him feel very comfortable. Thus, no matter how strong Ling Han's alchemy skills were, he accepted this kind gesture. "Young man, how should I address you?" he asked again. "Ling Han." "What?" Yun Yong Wang exclaimed in shock and almost jumped up. This person actually had the same name as his deceased master. Before this, he had already felt that Ling Han was very familiar, and now with this name, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Unfortunately, no matter how he looked, he couldn't find any similarities between this Ling Han and his master. Moreover, before he had gone to the immortal realm, his master had already disappeared for several hundred years, so he should have indeed died. It's just a coincidence, he thought. "Ling Han, where are you from?" Yun Yong Wang couldn't help but ask. "Joint Peace Planet," Ling Han answered. He didn't directly reveal his identity. Firstly, there were many eyes and ears here. If he revealed that he was from the lower realm, it was extremely likely that the 5 sects would find out, and they would target him in advance. Secondly, 10,000 years had already passed, so he didn't know whether these disciples of his had changed or not. This change referred to the bottom line of good and evil. He had to observe them first. Yun Yong Wang was slightly at a loss. The immortal realm was too big, and unless one was a businessman, the majority of people would stay on the same planet for their entire lives. Moreover, the Joint Peace Planet was 200 years away from this planet at normal travel speed, so it was normal that he hadn't heard of it. "Oh." He nodded, a sliver of disappointment appearing on his face. However, he felt more at ease, and focused on the competition between Liang Jinbo and Kong Xiu Yuan. This was related to the Han Lin Pavilion's future. Chapter 1226. Ling Han didn't mind. Hadn't he joined the Hanlin Pavilion so that he could replace Kang Xiaoyuan after he lost? With the Alchemy Emperor around, how could he lose? Moreover, the refinement of a level 5 divine pill would take about 10 days. Thus, Ling Han left to find Feng Piyun and the others. He couldn't waste any time. Moreover, he had to think about how he was going to explain his other identity to them. He decided to take it slow and explain it to Kang Xiaoyuan and the others after he acknowledged them. 8 days later, Ling Han returned to the Hanlin Pavilion. The competition between Kang Xiaoyuan and Liang Jinbo was nearing its end. However, once pill refinement began, completing 1% was the same as completing 99%. There couldn't be any distractions or mistakes. Otherwise, all of their efforts would be wasted. Thus, they became even more solemn at this time. Half a day later, the two of them stopped almost at the same time. Open! Both of them slapped the lid of their cauldrons. They were about to open their cauldrons. However, Kang Xiaoyuan tapped the cauldron repeatedly with his hands, causing the flames to jump rapidly a few times. This was the three-fire guide, Ling Han's innovation in alchemy. Liang Jinbo displayed his cauldron to everyone first. There were 3 round pills inside, and they were about to fly out of the cauldron when he forcefully suppressed them and sealed them in the cauldron. Kang Xiaoyuan tilted his cauldron slightly, and said, "I didn't disappoint you, Brother Liang." Astonishingly, there were also 3 pills in his pill furnace. However, Kang Xiaoyuan secretly wiped his forehead. If it weren't for the fact that he had mastered the 3-fire guide and improved the quality and success rate of the pills at the last moment, he would only be able to refine 2 pills in this cauldron. He could only secretly hope that his opponent could also refine 3 pills. Otherwise, he would definitely lose. Then let's compare the quality. The two of them took out their pills, poured them into their palms and placed them together. For alchemists like them, they only needed to look and smell to determine the quality of a pill. Kang Xiaoyuan's expression quickly changed. Whether it was in terms of color or smell, his opponent's quality was superior to his, and it wasn't just by a little. There was a clear disparity. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he sighed and said, "I lost." "Ha ha ha ha." Liang Jinbo roared with laughter. The Hanlin Pavilion had suffered a crushing defeat in this spar. As the main force of this match, he was naturally extremely delighted. "Don't be disappointed," Ling Han suddenly said. "He's stronger than you because he became a level 5 alchemist long ago. He's been cultivating for tens of thousands of years longer than you. If you train for a few more years, it won't be difficult for you to surpass him." Kang Xiaoyuan was startled, and he walked toward Ling Han with a confused expression. Who was this guy? Why was he acting like an old man? His tone made him sound like he was his master. Previously, he had been concentrating on concocting pills, and wouldn't know even if the sky collapsed. Thus, he naturally didn't know who Ling Han was, nor did he know that Ling Han was now a member of the Hanlin Pavilion. But Liang Jinbo was furious. What was the meaning of this? A loss was a loss. Was this an excuse? He couldn't help but snort coldly. "Are you guys sore losers?" "Lose?" Ling Han laughed loudly, shook his head and said, "The spar isn't over yet, so how is this a loss?" "Not over yet? Your strongest alchemist has already participated, so what else do you want?" "Hold on, who is this brat? Where did he come from?" Liang Jinbo asked, "Who is this person?" "Brother Kong, Brother Yun. Since when did this person become the master of the Hanlin Pavilion?" Ling Han waved his hand and said, "I'm a newly hired alchemist of the Hanlin Pavilion. In the next match, I'll compete with you. Are there any level 6 or level 7 alchemists? Take them out for a spin." "Fuck. Take them out for a spin? Do you think alchemists are dogs? You actually dare to spar?" This infuriated Liang Jinbo. There was a sinister look in his eyes, and he said, "Brother Kong, Brother Yun, how long do you plan to let this brat run wild?" Kang Xiaoyuan was just about to speak when he saw Ling Han walk over and snatched the 3 alchemical pills from his hand. Although his cultivation level was also at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, it was completely insufficient in front of Ling Han. "If a tiger doesn't show its might, you'll think I'm a sick cat." Ling Han tossed the 3 alchemical pills back into the alchemy cauldron, and then began to refine them. "What? You've already refined the alchemical pills, and you're actually going to refine them again? Are you fucking retarded? To say nothing of alchemical pills, even forged tools weren't something that could be tossed into the fire to refine and refine if one wasn't satisfied. God tools contained the will of martial art. Carelessly refining them would only erase the will of martial art and destroy the God tool. It was the same for alchemical pills. However, the divine patterns within them were interwoven with the regulations of heaven and earth, and they were even more fragile. Why did one have to be so careful in every step of pill refinement? That was because the cauldron would be ruined if even one of the divine patterns was interwoven wrongly. Kang Xiuyuan was just about to stop him, yet Yun Yongwang pulled him back. He was filled with confusion and asked why. His name is Ling Han, Yun Yongwang said. What? Kang Xiuyuan was stunned. However, he immediately shook his head. Ling Han definitely couldn't be their master. He had died over 10,000 years ago. However, because they had the same name, he also chose to let Ling Han fool around for once. Ling Han continued to refine the alchemical pills, and the flames burned fiercely. Soon, an astonishing medicinal fragrance wafted out, and it could be smelled in a radius of 5 kilometers. Huh! The cauldron actually didn't explode? Liang Jinbo was incredibly astonished. Level 5 divine pills contained a massive amount of energy. If they were refined by this kind of flame, it would be very easy for the balance within them to be disrupted. As a result, the terrifying energy would explode. In the best-case scenario, the cauldron would explode, and in the worst-case scenario, it would cause a massive explosion. This explosion was comparable to the full power attack of 10 or even 100 elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. This was because this was a concentrated explosion of energy. It was like the ultimate arrow, and its might was far beyond one's cultivation level. However, even though Ling Han was fooling around, this cauldron of alchemical pills actually didn't explode. This was far too strange. It was practically unbelievable. Could it be that he didn't put the alchemical pills in at all? Ling Han's expression was extremely focused. He was trying to improve the quality of the alchemical pills. This was extremely difficult to achieve, even for an alchemy emperor like him. However, fortunately, this was only a level 5 divine pill. Meanwhile, his alchemy level had already reached level 7, so there was a chance that he could succeed. The difficulty was far too high, and it was no less than refining a cauldron of level 7 divine pills. Thus, even Ling Han had to be extremely careful. He extracted the divine patterns within the godly medicine, and they continuously intertwined as he made subtle adjustments. Improving the quality of the alchemical pills wasn't the same as refining them all over again. Thus, this process didn't take much time. After merely 2 hours, Ling Han stopped. The process of improving the quality of the alchemical pills had already been completed. He opened the cauldron and retrieved the alchemical pills from within. He then tossed them toward Liang Jinbo and said, "Frog in a well, learn well." Liang Jinbo subconsciously caught them. His eyes swept over them, and an expression of disbelief instantly spread across his face. Chapter 12:28. Everyone's expression changed. This bet was too much. Everyone's expression changed. This bet was too much. Although the Treasure Forest Pavilion dared to bully the Hanlin Pavilion, that was only a matter of business, not a person. It was merely a business competition. If one's strength was inferior, there was nothing to say. But He Jingyun's wager was just humiliating him. If he really crawled out of this street, would Ling Han still be able to stay here? He would definitely have to leave this city dejectedly, never daring to set foot in this city again. Ling Han's expression also turned cold. He could ignore business competition, but He Jingyun was clearly targeting him now. Humph, you're really seeking your own death. Are you sure you want to compete with the Alchemy Emperor? Fine. Ling Han agreed immediately. You asked for it. We're competing in refining level 6 divine pills, He Jingyun emphasized. His opponent's vitality was so strong that he probably wasn't even 1,000 years old, so he had at most been a level 6 alchemist for 1,000 years. It was only 1,000 years, so how many cauldrons of level 6 divine pills could he have refined? How much understanding could he have? However, he would never have imagined that Ling Han was not only the alchemy emperor, but also a reincarnation tree. Cultivating under the tree for a day was a year. Ling Han smiled and said, "Of course. Since you're a junior, I'll choose first. I'll refine the explosive thunder pill." In reality, he only knew one level 6 divine pill, and he would refine it regardless of whether it was first or second. Since that was the case, why not act cool for once? Sure enough, as soon as he acted tough, the surrounding people were all moved. As mentioned before, there was a huge difference between first and second. The second would have the initiative and the choice would be greater. Explosive thunder pill. He Jingyun was slightly moved. This was an extremely difficult pill to refine even among level 6 divine pills. Moreover, it was an ancient recipe, and not many people had mastered it. However, he just so happened to be one of those who had mastered it. Then I'll also choose the explosive thunder pill," He Jingyun said confidently. Ling Han smirked coldly in his mind. The other party definitely didn't know that he had spent a lot of effort on the explosive thunder pill because there were pitifully few people who knew how to refine this kind of alchemical pill. Moreover, its effects were extraordinarily powerful, and it could raise the battle prowess of those in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier by 2 stars. Its value was ridiculously high. Therefore, he would make a cauldron of pills every once in a while. Not only was he able to maintain a 100% success rate, but the quality of the pills had also greatly improved. Choose the explosive thunder pill to compete with him. To ask for it, then prepare the materials and prepare to begin, alchemist Hu said. Both sides were preparing their materials. However, a troubled expression immediately appeared on the Han Lin Pavilion's face. This was because they didn't have a level 6 alchemist, so they naturally wouldn't prepare level 6 materials. However, Ling Han smiled as he retrieved materials from the Black Tower. Yun Yongwang and Kang Xiao Yuan were both touched and confused by his actions. Why did Ling Han help the Han Lin Pavilion so much? But at this moment, no matter how confused they were, it was impossible for them to push their only strong ally out of the door. After both sides had prepared their materials, they said begin to each other, and the competition began. Ling Han did this casually. He had already refined a few cauldrons of this explosive thunder pill. Moreover, he would summarize his experience under the reincarnation tree every time he refined it, and he would improve on his shortcomings. He was the alchemy emperor, and the reincarnation tree was nature-defying. Every time he meditated, his skill in refining the explosive thunder pill would improve greatly. Right now, he was extremely familiar with this process, and it was incredibly easy for him. In contrast, He Jingyun was extremely careful, and he didn't dare to get distracted at all. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, and he appeared to be incredibly nervous. With such a comparison, it was clear who had the upper hand. Unless that Ling Han is bluffing, he's definitely going to win this round with his calm demeanor. Haha, didn't He Jingyun say that the loser would have to crawl out of this street? I'm already looking forward to it. A level 6 alchemist crawling out of the street isn't something that can be seen every day. Everyone couldn't help but whisper among themselves, thinking that Ling Han had a higher chance of winning. However, refining a cauldron of level 6 pills required about half a month's time. Even though Ling Han seemed to have the upper hand, the true outcome would only be decided after half a month. Thus, many people grew impatient, and would naturally return to eat or sleep. They could wait for half a month before coming back to see the results. Time passed by silently, and half a month's time had already passed. He Jingyun revealed an extremely haggard expression. He was refining a level 6 divine pill, and interweaving the divine patterns required an astonishing amount of mental and physical effort. Not only was his consciousness exhausted, but even his origin power was almost completely depleted. When refining this type of pill, alchemists usually had to consume pills as they refined to replenish their origin power. However, He Jingyun was known as an alchemist prodigy, and he indeed had some skill. From start to finish, he hadn't consumed a single pill. This wasn't just arrogance. Rather, if he consumed pills, it was inevitable that he would be slightly distracted, which would affect the quality of the completed pill. It was naturally best for him to be able to work in one go. However, he was also about to become dry. After refining this cauldron of pills, he would have to rest for at least a month. However, compared to Ling Han's words, this was truly shocking. He was still calm, and there wasn't even a drop of sweat on his forehead. However, his eyes had become slightly brighter. Open. He Jingyun slapped the cauldron forcefully. Pa! The lid flew off and 3 pills actually flew out on their own. It was as if they were trying to escape. He Jingyun was already prepared, and with a grab of his right hand, the 3 pills landed in his palm. An expression of satisfaction appeared on his face. In the past, he could at most refine 2 pills in a single cauldron, but this time he actually exceeded his standard, and managed to refine 3 pills. Haha, I'm definitely going to win. Ling Han also slapped the cauldron. Xiu xiu xiu. A few specks of light also flew out from the cauldron, but this was clearly more than 3 pills. 5 pills. Pooh! The alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion immediately spluttered. Although none of them knew how to refine explosive thunder pills, this didn't prevent them from knowing that the highest number of explosive thunder pills refined in this cauldron was only 5 pills. In other words, Ling Han had reached a perfect condition. Pa! All 5 pills landed in Ling Han's hand. He spread out his hand again, and 5 light blue pills were currently spinning in his palm. It was as if they were trying to break free from Ling Han's control and fly into the sky. He Jingyun gritted his teeth, and his face alternated between red and green. He lost. He definitely wouldn't accept this. If he lost, he would have to crawl out of this street. How was he going to live in the future? He shouted, "The number of pills you refined is indeed higher than mine, but we still have to compare the quality of the pills. If the quality of your explosive thunder pills is only 1 or 2 stars, how can they compare to mine?" This wasn't unreasonable. However, if one had an advantage in the number of pills refined, it usually meant that one had an advantage in the quality of the pills refined. Thus, one would only compare the quality of the pills if they had the same number of pills. He was clearly just a sore loser. Ling Han smiled and said, "Then let's appraise them." Chapter 12:29. The results of the appraisal were quickly obtained. Alchemy and appraisal skills were 2 completely different things. Even level 1 alchemists or even non-alchemists could appraise alchemical pills very well. However, they needed to have a good understanding of alchemical pills. Ling Han had a complete victory. He Jingyun's explosive thunder pill barely reached 6 stars, but Ling Han's was 9 stars. It wasn't perfect, but that was because Ling Han hadn't used the 3 fire guide at the end to prevent his 2 disciples from noticing. He Jingyun was dazed. He had lost, and it was a complete defeat at that. The gap between them wasn't just a little bit. "Please," Ling Han said with a smile. If he lost, he would have to crawl the streets. He Jingyun humped and turned to leave. He was too ashamed to stay here. Hey, use 4 legs, not 2, Ling Han said. He Jingyun turned around and proudly said, "You want me, a level 6 alchemist, to crawl?" He hadn't even finished speaking when he was picked up by Ling Han. He tried to kick him, but he couldn't break free no matter what. He was stunned. One had to realize that he was also at the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier, which was equivalent to Ling Han's cultivation level. Why couldn't he resist at all? I hate people who don't keep their promises the most. Ling Han tossed him to the ground and said, "If you keep your promise, you'll have to eat it even if it's shit. If you dare to touch a single hair on my head, I guarantee that the Treasure Forest Pavilion will tear you to shreds." He Jingyun threatened. If he crawled the streets in front of everyone, he wouldn't just be humiliating himself. Ling Han chuckled and said, "I'm so scared." He added another kick and said, "Crawl." He Jingyun was naturally unwilling. If he crawled, he would really be too ashamed to face others. "Who the hell do you think you are? You talk like you're farting." Ling Han stomped on He Jingyun's face. However, He Jingyun's stubbornness was evident for once. He actually buried his head into the shattered bricks, planning to be a coward. Although it wasn't a glorious thing to be stomped on, it was still better than crawling the streets in front of everyone. "Grandmaster Ling, it's about time to stop," Alchemist Hu and the others advised. "All right, I'll let him go if one of you crawls for him," said Ling Han with a smile. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion looked at each other, and they hurriedly shook their heads. What a joke. He Jingyun's face was face, but their face was nothing. Quick! Get reinforcements. They held back Ling Han as they waited for reinforcements from the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han did not mind. Even if He Jingyun did not crawl on the street, he would still lose face after being stepped on like that. After a while, more people from the Treasure Forest Pavilion finally arrived. Stop, a cultivator shouted. He was definitely not an alchemist, as there was not the slightest hint of medicinal scent on his body. As he shouted, 2 complete suns and moons appeared behind him, showing that he was at the peak stage of the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier. Okay. Ling Han readily agreed, but his feet were still stomping madly. I told you to stop. The elite was enraged, and he stretched out a palm to grab Ling Han. Ling Han punched out with a smile and said, I did stop, but you didn't tell me to stop. Pung. His body suddenly sank as their attacks collided. His power was comparable to the late stage of the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier, but it was still 10 times weaker than the peak stage of the sun-moon tier. However, his physique was far too powerful, so he was completely unaffected by this attack. However, don't forget that he was stepping on He Jingyun, and this irresistible force was instantly transmitted through Ling Han's feet to his body. Pa 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 pa. The bricks on the ground were all crushed into powder, and he was deeply embedded into the ground. Not even his figure could be seen. The elite was enraged. He was a protector of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and although his power could not be considered top tier compared to Ling Han, who was only at the early stage of the sun-moon tier, he should naturally be able to crush him. However, the reality was completely different from what he had imagined. Hey, do you still want to compete? Ling Han's eyes swept over him. Among the newcomers of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, there was not only this elite. There were also a few other alchemists. One was that they had immersed themselves in alchemy for too long, and the smell of medicine could be seen even with the naked eye. The smell of medicine steamed behind him, turning into a dense mist. Young man, could it be that you're also a level 7 alchemist? An elder humphed, his eyes filled with disbelief. Although Big Trade City was large from the perspective of the entire Imperial Empire, it was actually a small city. Right, the most powerful force in the vicinity, the Cloud Phoenix sect, only had elites at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier. Thus, the highest alchemist that the Treasure Forest Pavilion could concoct here was only a level 7 alchemist. Occasionally, there would be level 8 alchemists who would concoct some level 8 divine pills. Because there were only a few elites at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier here, who would they sell to if they concocted too many level 8 divine pills? This elder's surname was Li, and he was one of the 3 level 7 alchemists that were permanently stationed at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had been at this level for close to 2 million years, and it was probably impossible for him to advance to level 8 in his lifetime. However, because he was old enough, he was naturally arrogant. Now, a young man who knew how much younger than him, could actually be a level 7 alchemist? How could he not be extremely jealous? Ling Han scoffed and said, Old man, you've lived like a dog for so many years. You haven't improved at all, yet you're jealous of others. That's very bad. Alchemist Li almost exploded in anger. He chided. You have no respect for your elders. You're too rude. Rude? Ling Han shook his head and said, We're all level 7 alchemists, so how can I be rude? Respect is earned through strength, not through self-praise. Fine, I'll compete with you. Alchemist Li roared. His white hair fluttered in anger, and he wanted to eat Ling Han alive. Fine. Ling Han nodded and said, Then, should we add another wager or something? He pointed at He Jingyun, who was still beneath his feet. At this moment, He Jingyun didn't know how many fucking horses were galloping through his mind. Alchemist Li humphed and said, If you lose, you'll immediately scram from Big Trade City. Fine, if you lose, please scram as well, Ling Han said calmly. Grandmaster Li. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion hurriedly said. This young man was far too freakish, and his strength was unfathomable. It was truly thoughtless to make such a wager. Humph, do you all not trust me? Alchemist Li humphed, and swept his gaze across the crowd. It was clear that he was very displeased. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all wiped away their cold sweat. They had all seen Ling Han's performance before. This young man couldn't be judged by appearance or age at all. His alchemy skills could only be described as unfathomable. If he failed miserably, wouldn't he be completely humiliated? Brat, bring it on. Today, I'll teach you what it means to be experienced, alchemistly challenged Ling Han. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, since you're so old, I'll choose first. I'll refine the spiritual rainbow developing pill. Pooh! Alchemistly spluttered. Chapter 1230. The spiritual rainbow developing pill was definitely one of the best tier 7 god pills, be it in terms of its effects or the difficulty of its refinement. Alchemistly will not. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was very awesome, and it could be said that an old man like him was extremely loyal. Thus, he was naturally able to obtain the trust of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. As long as the pill level was right, the Treasure Forest Pavilion would unconditionally provide any pill recipe that he wanted to learn. The spiritual rainbow developing pill was an ancient recipe, yet the Treasure Forest Pavilion still possessed it. Alchemistly had also learned it before, but after failing a few hundred times, he no longer dared to try again. Can't afford to lose like this. Alchemists were rich, but did level 7 ingredients not need money? Not only did they need money, but they were also ridiculously expensive. He didn't want to be outdone and say that he would also refine the spiritual rainbow developing pill to compete with him, but he really didn't have the confidence to do so. His expression changed. If Ling Han could really concoct the spiritual rainbow developing pill, then no matter what kind of pill he concocted, even if it was perfect, it would be useless. There would only be one word for him: defeat. No, he doesn't believe it. If such a young lad was able to surpass him in alchemy, then hadn't he been living like a dog for the past 2 million years? I will refine the 4-cloud 4-rise pill. This was the most difficult level 7 medicinal pill he could refine. Although it could not compare to the spiritual rainbow developing pill, at least he could not lose out in terms of momentum. Both sides prepared their materials and started refining. He Jingyun had already been dug out by someone. His face was now colorful, and it was incomparably fascinating. Logically speaking, after losing so much face, he should leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be a disgrace to be looked at by others. But he didn't want to leave. He wanted to see this battle with his own eyes. He wanted Ling Han to fail. But as soon as the competition started, he realized that something was wrong. Ling Han was far more composed than alchemistly. One had to know that the spiritual rainbow developing pill that Ling Han had concocted was far more difficult than the 4 clouds rising pill, but he was even more composed. What did this mean? Their strengths were not on the same level. Unfortunately, Pill Masterly could not afford to be distracted in the slightest. The 4 clouds 4 rise pill was the most difficult level 7 divine pill he had mastered. However, he could not guarantee success every time he refined such a divine pill, so he naturally had to be extremely careful. The time required to concoct a level 7 god pill was even longer, 20 days as a base. As for a level 8 god pill, it would take at least a month. Everyone went back to what they were doing. Apart from the members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion and the Hanlin Pavilion, everyone else left. It wouldn't be too late to come back after a dozen or so days. However, on the 16th day, Pill Masterly was defeated. The furnace had exploded. Bam! With a loud bang, the pill furnace exploded. Fortunately, the consequences weren't serious. It was fine as long as the pill furnace exploded. Otherwise, more than half of the people here would have died. The old man was in a daze. His furnace had actually exploded, so he could only hope that Ling Han's furnace had also exploded. Otherwise, as long as the other party could refine the pill, he would win. After a few more days, Ling Han stopped and fiercely slapped the furnace lid. Pung! With a light sound, 3 medicinal pills flew out. They were surrounded by divine light and shockingly resplendent. Pills formed. Pill Masterly instantly collapsed to the ground. Ling Han had actually refined the spiritual rainbow developing pill. Even if his furnace hadn't exploded, he would still be in awe of Ling Han. Moreover, Ling Han hadn't just refined pills. He had refined a whole 3 pills. How terrifying. Ling Han held the 3 spiritual rainbow developing pills in his hand, and said with a smile, "Do you want to inspect them, Pill Master Li?" "No, there's no need," Alchemist Li said dejectedly. He had personally witnessed Ling Han concoct alchemical pills in the following few days. Even he found Ling Han's natural and smooth movements to be pleasing to the eye. Ling Han's skills were far superior to his own. He crawled to his feet and pushed through the crowd as he strode forward. His figure appeared extremely stooped. Everyone sighed. This was a level 7 alchemist. The alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion hurriedly chased after him, all of them trying to dissuade him. However, Pill Master Li smiled and said, "I naturally have to keep my word. I will never return to Big Trade City. However, I only said that I would leave Big Trade City. I didn't say that I would leave the Treasure Forest Pavilion. I can go to a branch in another city." Fuck. Everyone's faces twitched. Sure enough, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. After going around in a circle, he was still staying in the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had merely moved to another city. For alchemists, was it important where they refined their pills? However, being forced out of Big Trade City was still a stain on their reputation. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all covered their faces as they left. They had won this competition by a large margin, yet they had suffered a crushing defeat afterward. Now, they couldn't produce a level 8 alchemist, so they naturally could only retreat. Staying here would only invite humiliation upon themselves. This was a competition of alchemy. Thus, even though the Treasure Forest Pavilion possessed powerful martial art, they couldn't act recklessly. After all, there were still some rules that they had to abide by. "Greetings, Grandmaster Ling." Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan led the members of the Han Lin Pavilion in saluting Ling Han respectfully. Even though Ling Han was young, his alchemy prowess was clear for all to see. A level 7 alchemist wasn't awesome enough. Ling Han had no qualms accepting this. This was his disciple in the first place, so wasn't it normal for him to acknowledge him? He casually raised his hand and said, "There's no need." Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan invited Ling Han into the inner room. There were naturally people outside to clean up the mess. After this competition, many people had come to purchase alchemical pills because of its reputation, and business was booming. Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan were puzzled, and they asked Grandmaster, "May I ask why you're helping us?" With Ling Han's alchemy prowess, he could definitely find a better future in the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Why did he have to submit to a small sect like theirs? In fact, he didn't even hesitate to oppose the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han sipped his tea, and after a while he said, "I have some history with your sect." Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan exchanged a glance. Neither of them understood where this history had come from. One had to realize that they had come to the immortal realm 10,000 years ago, and it was clear that no one from the lower realm could come up again. Those who had come up were all members of the 5 sects. "A few years ago, I opened the sky and came from the lower realm." Ling Han decided to divulge a little secret. "What?" Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan stood up at the same time. They were so shocked that their scalps went numb. The lower realm. It was actually the lower realm. How is this possible? Kong Xiao Yuan shook his head repeatedly. Who didn't know that the lower realm was controlled by the 5 sects? To say nothing of opening the sky, even shattering void tier cultivators would fall into the formation set up by the 5 sects and die. Opening the sky meant that one had to break through the seal set up by the 5 sects. Was this possible? Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "There is nothing in this world that is impossible. So what if it's the 5 sects? Can they hide the truth from the masses?" This was true. Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan looked at each other, and they felt as if the efforts of the 3 of them for close to 10,000 years had all gone to waste. Oh. Chapter 1232. This woman's status was high and lofty, and no one dared to talk back to her. This woman's status was high and lofty, and no one dared to talk back to her. It wasn't that she was ugly, but rather that she was too seductive, and if they looked at her too much, they would become impulsive. They wouldn't even know how they died. Master, our business has fallen by at least 20%. And the Han Lin Pavilion has earned all of it, a protector said. Lin Yuqi lazily leaned back in her chair and said, so many days have passed, and you still haven't come up with a solution? An old alchemist said, Master, the most important thing in an alchemy competition is strength. We have lost in the competition of high-level alchemical pills, and this has caused many customers to lose confidence in us. If we want to turn the tables, we must defeat the Han Lin Pavilion in alchemy, a senior alchemist said. Although alchemists had a lofty status, as long as they lived in this mortal world, how could they escape fame and fortune? Lin Yuqi's background was too powerful, so even alchemists had to be respectful to her. Don't talk nonsense. Where's the solution? Lin Yuqi waved her hand, appearing very impatient. The old alchemist said, there are two solutions. He paused and then said, first, the Han Lin Pavilion can only rely on an alchemist named Ling Han. If we can recruit him, the Han Lin Pavilion will be beaten back to its original state. Lin Yuqi nodded and asked, what about the second? That Ling Han claims to be a level 7 alchemist, the old alchemist said. We only need to invite a level 8 alchemist to compete with him. Regardless of whether it's a competition of level 7 or level 8 alchemical pills, we will definitely win. However, the level 8 alchemist is not permanently stationed in our pavilion. Even if we immediately send out a request, it will take 2 or 3 months for him to reach our city. If there are any delays along the way, it will take even longer. Lin Yuqi paused for a moment and then said, then let's try both ways. First, recruit that Ling Han. If he is willing to obey, that will naturally be the best. If he refuses to listen, then suppress him. The old alchemist nodded and said yes. Lin Yuqi thought for a moment, and then said, it seems like that Ling Han's alchemy skills aren't bad. In that case, why don't you set a higher price? And we'll do it according to the standards of a level 8 alchemist. Yes. The old alchemist nodded. He believed that as long as Ling Han was not an idiot, he would definitely agree to such conditions. But what he never expected was that before he could even see Ling Han's face, he was directly asked to leave by Ling Han's 2 followers. After reporting this matter to Lin Yuqi, this seductive beauty was naturally enraged. She ordered for a level 8 alchemist to be transferred over as soon as possible so that she could thoroughly suppress Ling Han. Unfortunately, that level 8 alchemist had actually gone into seclusion at this critical juncture. Apparently, he had obtained an ancient pill recipe and was currently focused on studying it. Thus, he wouldn't be able to return anytime soon. Right now, the Treasure Forest Pavilion couldn't do anything. They could only watch as the Han Lin Pavilion grew stronger day by day. However, in at most half a year, regardless of whether he had finished studying it or not, that alchemist would definitely come out for a breather. At that time, someone would naturally pass on the news and invite that level 8 alchemist over to deal with Ling Han. At the same time, Ling Han was also diligently studying the Berserk Blood Spirit pill in seclusion. This kind of alchemical pill was also known as the saintly medicine of the Sun Moon tier in ancient times. Not only was it astonishingly effective, but it was also especially difficult to refine. One had to extract and interweave the medicinal properties, and the complexity was comparable to low-level level 9 divine pills. A whole half a year passed, and Ling Han finally understood every step. Next, it was the actual refinement. Ling Han's heart ached slightly because he definitely couldn't succeed on his first try. However, if he failed once, he would waste a Red Rain Divine King fruit, and this represented a sub-minor level of the Sun Moon tier. However, if he didn't refine it, that would be even more of a waste. No matter how precious the Red Rain Divine King fruit was, it only represented wealth at most. He began to attempt to refine it. Failure, 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 failure. Level 8 divine pills were indeed difficult to refine. Even though Ling Han had already grasped every step, and was extremely familiar with the interweaving of divine patterns, he was still prone to making mistakes during the actual refinement process. He had comprehended these divine patterns under the reincarnation tree, which was equivalent to having spent over 100 years to familiarize himself with them. There was a huge difference between being an armchair strategist and actually fighting. Ling Han's heart ached to death. The number of Red Rain Divine King fruits was continuously decreasing. From a maximum of 129, It had already dropped to 87. He could clearly calculate how many times he had failed. When there were only 46 Red Rain Divine King fruits left, Ling Han finally refined the first cauldron of Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Just one. This wasn't a problem of his ability, because he could produce one Berserk Blood Spirit Pill with each cauldron. There was only a difference in quality, not quantity. Success, I finally succeeded. Ling Han laughed loudly. He wasn't in a hurry to consume this divine pill. Instead, he immediately sat down in a cross-legged position and summarized the various shortcomings in his alchemy this time. It was precisely because he had this kind of habit that he was able to advance rapidly on the path of alchemy. With the help of the reincarnation tree, he was naturally like a tiger that had grown wings. 2 days later, he concluded his summary and continued to concoct. Another pill was formed and its quality had also improved slightly. Ling Han broke into a grin. If he could ingest these 2 Berserk Blood Spirit pills in succession, his cultivation level would rapidly rise by 2 subminor levels. His battle prowess would also obviously rise by 2 stars. However, ingesting a Berserk Blood Spirit pill required 3 days of refining. Ling Han had already been in seclusion for so long, so it was about time for him to go out and see what was going on. He exited the Black Tower, and just as he pushed open the door, he saw Zhu Wujiu run over. He exclaimed in pleasant surprise, "Young Master Han, you've finally come out of seclusion. What is it?" The Treasure Forest Pavilion has sent another letter of challenge, saying that they want to challenge young Master Han, Zhu Wujiu said. He paused for a moment and then continued, "The letter of challenge was sent over 2 months ago, but young Master Han has been in seclusion this entire time, and hasn't responded even after so long. Now, everyone is saying that young Master Han is afraid to accept the challenge." Ling Han couldn't help but smile. He never cared about what others thought. It wasn't like he was living for them to control. In any case, as long as he possessed absolute power, what could others do? Since that's the case, I'll go and meet them. Ling Han headed toward the Hanlin Pavilion. Upon entering, he discovered that there were unusually few customers here. The entire store was deserted, and most of the employees were idling around. They were far too idle. However, because Ling Han was afraid to accept the challenge, the reputation that the Hanlin Pavilion had built up had completely collapsed. Now it was only natural that no one paid any attention to it. "Grand Elder, you've finally come out." Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan's frown disappeared as if they had seen their savior. Ling Han chuckled and said, "In the past, it was always them who came here to challenge us. Today, let's go to the Treasure Forest Pavilion and challenge them as well." "Sure." Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan nodded excitedly. They naturally had a belly full of anger. Chapter 1233. However, the Treasure Forest Pavilion has dispatched a level 8 alchemist this time, Kong Xiao Yuan said. Moreover, he's renowned as a prodigy. Of course, the purpose of this challenge was to win. However, if they were beaten up instead, that wouldn't be fun. Level 8 alchemist Ling Han smiled. If this had been half a year ago, he would have had to reconsider. After all, having a level 8 alchemist concoct a level 7 alchemical pill would definitely be able to greatly increase the success rate, and the quality of the pill would also be improved. He was confident, but he wasn't certain that he would win. But now, he had already concocted the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, and his skill level was close to that of a level 9 alchemist. What did he have to fear from a level 8 alchemist? "It's fine," Ling Han said. Kong Xiao Yuan and Yun Yongwang exchanged a glance, and then nodded in agreement. Ling Han's achievements in alchemy were astonishing. If he were to refine level 7 alchemical pills, even a level 8 alchemist might not be able to suppress him. The three of them quickly arrived at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. In comparison, the time-honored Treasure Forest Pavilion was truly imposing and majestic. Just the area it occupied was 10 times larger than that of the Hanlin Pavilion. It didn't look like a pharmacy at all. Instead, it looked like a magnificent palace. Because they had suppressed the Hanlin Pavilion earlier, this place naturally regained its former liveliness. There was a long line of customers coming in and out of the entrance, and it seemed as if it would never stop. Ling Han strode over and loudly said, "The great elder of the Hanlin Pavilion, Ling Han, has come to issue a challenge. Does anyone dare to accept it?" With this shout, the never-ending stream of passengers suddenly stopped, and they all rushed toward Ling Han. The Hanlin Pavilion accepted the challenge. This is gonna be fun. After a short while, a voice traveled out from the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Grandmaster Ling has been a coward for so many years, and he finally dares to show his face. That dog is barking. Ling Han immediately scolded. You dare call me a dog?" The voice said angrily. "Haha, I'm just saying. Why do you think so highly of me?" Ling Han laughed. "Do you feel guilty that you're in the wrong? That's why you think that whenever the word dog is mentioned it's related to you? Damn it." Bam! The sound of things being smashed could be heard in the main hall. Clearly, someone was very angry. Master Ling is indeed not simple, seizing the person first. Another old voice rang out, and an old alchemist walked out from the main hall. Because there was a long flight of stairs leading from the path to the door, the old man stood there, and instantly looked down at Ling Han from a high vantage point. To actually play such a small trick in front of him. Ling Han's figure swayed, and he instantly turned into a giant. Under the powerful Yuan power, this was naturally a piece of cake. He looked down at the old alchemist and said, "I've come to accept the challenge. Who from the Treasure Forest Pavilion wishes to fight me?" The corner of the old alchemist's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, this kid really doesn't want to suffer any losses. He chuckled and said, "Then please wait for a moment, Master Ling. I will go and invite Master Han out." He turned around and entered the main hall, while Ling Han also retracted his figure. This kind of fight was just for fun. This world was all about strength. "Let's go," Ling Han said, and took the lead. Kong Xiao Yuan and Kong Xiao Yuan exchanged a glance, and then hurriedly followed. A strange feeling welled up in their hearts as they looked at Ling Han, who was in front of them. It was as if they had returned to the lower realm, where they had followed their master and defeated all kinds of famous alchemists. In the end, they had established Ling Han's status as the Alchemy Emperor. The three of them quickly entered the main hall, and the other party was already waiting for them. They formed a human wall, all of them crossing their arms over their chests, appearing to be very aggressive. Ling Han retrieved a chair from the Black Tower and sat down. He didn't treat himself as an outsider at all, and he was extremely calm. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion were all enraged by this. "How confident are you? You're acting as if you're the master of this place." After a while, the human wall suddenly parted, and a woman walked out from the main hall. This was a beautiful woman with a frosty expression. Her figure was extremely slender, and her skin was extremely fair. If one had to point out a flaw, it would be that her breasts were a bit flat, and she wasn't voluptuous enough. "So you're Ling Han?" The beautiful woman swept her eyes over Ling Han, and a look of disdain and even disgust involuntarily appeared on her face. "I'm a level 8 alchemist. Why aren't you bowing to me?" "Tsk, how overbearing." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "How do you know that I'm not a level 9 alchemist? Isn't that obvious? Is there a level 9 alchemist as young as you? Do you think everyone is called Han Xinyan?" The beautiful woman was incredibly proud. She was a true alchemy prodigy, and she was only 10,000 years old now, yet she was already a level 8 alchemist. She hadn't advanced to level 9 because she was limited by her cultivation level in martial art. Her divine sense wasn't strong enough, and the divine flame she could summon wasn't strong enough either. Ling Han appeared to be even younger than she was, and he wanted to surpass her in alchemy? She didn't believe it. "Humph, fine," Han Xinyan said haughtily. "Then let's compete. If you lose, you'll obediently kowtow to me 100 times and admit that you've been rude." Ling Han smiled and said, "Then if you lose, a gentleman like me won't make you kowtow to me or anything. You'll just have to pour me a cup of tea and write me a sign of admiration." A cold glint flashed in Han Xinyan's eyes. This junior was actually so arrogant, and she was enraged. Alchemy was like martial art. The difference of one tier was like the difference between heaven and earth. A mere level 7 alchemist actually dared to act so arrogantly in front of a level 8 alchemist? This was great disrespect. She suppressed her anger and said, "Then let's cut the nonsense and begin refining the pill. Since you're a junior, I'll choose first. Refine the spiritual rainbow developing pill." Hearing her words, the crowd erupted into an uproar. Everyone knew that Ling Han had successfully refined the spiritual rainbow developing pill and defeated Alchemist Li of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, turning the tables in a single move. Now, however, Han Xinyan actually chose to refine the spiritual rainbow developing pill. She had absolute confidence in herself. She had defeated her opponent in her field of expertise. How domineering! Ling Han waved his hand and said, "We're not competing in level 7 alchemical pills today." "Ha, could it be that you want to refine a level 6 alchemical pill?" Han Xinyan chuckled coldly. "No, we're competing in level 8 alchemical pills," Ling Han said. The crowd instantly fell deathly silent. "You must be joking, right? You said yourself that you're only a level 7 alchemist. Why is it that only half a year has passed, and you're already saying that you're going to refine a level 8 divine pill? What kind of person can advance at such a rapid pace?" Kang Xiaoyuan and Ling Han were about to go crazy with anxiety. "You're going to explode the moment you start refining? Won't you become a laughing stock?" A sneer appeared on Han Xinyan's face and she said, "Don't say goodbye to me. You can still refine level 8 alchemical pills?" "Why not?" Ling Han retrieved his alchemy cauldron and said, "What I'm going to refine today is the Berserk Blood Spirit pill." "What?" Han Xinyan's expression changed. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill was a pill recipe that had been lost a long time ago. At the very least, no one in the Long Light Galaxy knew how to refine it. This pill recipe was far too valuable. Moreover, if a completed pill appeared, it would definitely cause an intense commotion. Oh. Chapter 1234. Is this guy bluffing? Han Xinyan couldn't make up her mind. The man in front of her was too confident. Either he had a card up his sleeve or he was a lunatic. "Then let's compete in refining 8th level pills," she said solemnly. At this moment, she really took Ling Han seriously and didn't dare to underestimate him anymore. "I will refine the 9 Emperor Golden Bell pill." This was also a level 8 alchemical pill, but it couldn't compare to the Berserk Blood Spirit pill in terms of medicinal efficacy or difficulty. However, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill could almost be considered a level 9 alchemical pill. Thus, no matter what alchemical pill she chose to refine, it would be impossible for it to surpass the Berserk Blood Spirit pill in terms of difficulty. Naturally, it didn't matter what she refined. As long as Ling Han successfully refined the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, regardless of the quality of the pill, Ling Han would be the winner. But on the other hand, if Ling Han's cauldron exploded while she formed the pill, then the one who lost would naturally be Ling Han. "Please." Both sides began to prepare their ingredients, and when Ling Han took out the Red Rain Divine King fruit, Han Xinyan's beautiful eyes involuntarily narrowed. He had even taken out such a divine fruit, so Ling Han was definitely not joking. Otherwise, the price would be too great. This guy, if he really grasped such an ancient recipe, he might even be able to successfully refine it. She felt that it was absurd, but for some reason, deep in her heart, she actually believed that Ling Han could succeed. This made her heart flustered. How could he predict that she would lose before the competition had even begun? The guests were all isolated at the door, and a restriction was laid down to prevent them from making any noise and disturbing the competition between the two. Yun Yongwang and Kang Xiaoyuan could only place their trust in Ling Han now. However, they were also unable to accept this. Only half a year had passed, yet this Grand Elder had already risen to the next level. Hong Divine Flame Sword. The two young alchemists had already begun their own refinement. As soon as Ling Han started refining pills, he immediately entered a state of forgetting himself and everything else. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill was the most difficult pill he had ever encountered. Furthermore, it was also his current limit. Thus, even he had to be extremely careful. A single mistake would cause all his previous efforts to go to waste. The refinement of a rank 8 divine pill required an entire month's time. Not only was this a test of patience and willpower, it also required the support of formidable origin energy and the soul. Because this was equivalent to an all-out battle, how many people could continuously fight for such a long time? A slight pause could cause the furnace to explode. Therefore, the higher up one went, the fewer pill refiners there were. Ling Han forgot about everything else. This was not just a competition. The berserk blood spirit pill that he had refined was the divine medicine that he needed at his current stage. Thus, since he could defeat the enemy and benefit himself at the same time, he naturally had to be serious. During the month of alchemy, everyone came and went and came and went. Aside from alchemists, who would have the patience to watch from beginning to end? However, to the majority of alchemists, this was truly a sumptuous feast. Watching two level 8 alchemists fight was extremely beneficial to them. When the last day arrived, almost everyone in the city came to witness the final result. Open! Ling Han and Han Xinyan simultaneously slapped their pill furnaces. Pung! The lid of the pill furnaces instantly flew into the air. This time, however, Ling Han didn't hold back anymore. He used the 3 fire guide, the technique that he was most proficient in. Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiao Yuan's mouths gaped open so wide that one could stuff an egg inside. 3 fire guide. That's definitely the 3 fire guide. The two of them exclaimed in their minds. However, the 3 fire guide was clearly their master's ultimate technique, and he had only taught it to the two of them. They hadn't taught it to anyone else in the lower realm. So, where had Ling Han learned it from? Could it be that he was their master's disciple? Xiao! A brilliant alchemical pill flew out from the pill furnace and danced wildly in the air. This was the berserk blood spirit pill. It had been refined. Han Xinyan merely glanced at it before sighing in her mind. With her judgment, she was able to determine that the pill Ling Han had concocted was definitely the berserk blood spirit pill just by looking at the red rain divine king fruit among the ingredients. Now that the pill had been refined, the result was obvious. She had lost and Ling Han had won. I've lost. She was completely convinced. Everyone was stunned. Who would have thought that Ling Han had actually become a level 8 alchemist? Moreover, he had defeated the prodigy among prodigies, Han Xinyan. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion were all petrified. During the past half a year, they had been waiting for the level 8 alchemist who had been studying ancient pill recipes in seclusion. However, that alchemist still hadn't come out. Coincidentally, Han Xinyan had coincidentally come to Lin Yuqi's place, and she had been asked by Lin Yuqi to challenge the Han Lin Pavilion. Han Xinyan was a renowned young alchemist, and there were countless halos above her head. In any case, she was born for alchemy, and she was one of the 10 most talented alchemists of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Yet, she had lost to an even younger alchemist. Inconceivable. Truly inconceivable. Han Xinyan was indeed proud, but she wasn't someone who would go back on her word. She immediately brought over a teacup and offered it to Ling Han. Then she used her finger like a sword and carved the word, convinced, under Ling Han's feet. She was willing to accept her loss, and she was open and honest. Ling Han nodded in his mind. This woman's temperament was good, and she was also very talented in alchemy. This made him want to take her as his 6th disciple. However, the two of them were at the same level of alchemy. Moreover, they were on opposing sides. If he said that he wanted to take her as his disciple, he would probably be rolled her eyes. He took a sip of tea and said, "We've competed in alchemy, and we've drunk our tea. Farewell." "Wait," Han Xinyan said. She bit her lip and said, "I'll challenge you again." Sure. But that'll have to wait until I have the time." Ling Han smiled. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Rather, his focus was ultimately on martial art. He couldn't continue to refine alchemy. Ling Han swaggered off with Yun Yongwang and the other young man in tow. The spectators naturally dispersed as well. However, when the 3 of them returned to the Han Lin Pavilion, they immediately discovered that there were at least 5 times more customers here than when they had left. Moreover, this was only the beginning. "May I ask, Grand Elder, did you use the 3 fire guide?" Kong Xiao Yuan asked eagerly after they returned to the Han Lin Pavilion. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Not bad." After half a year of observation, though it was not him, but Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu, Ling Han could conclude that these two disciples did not have any connection with the Cloud Phoenix sect, so they should not have forgotten their duties. "Grand Elder, where did you learn this secret technique?" Yun Yongwang asked. "Where?" Ling Han smiled as he reminisced. "This is a technique that I invented." Yun Yongwang and Kong Xiaoyuan stood up at the same time, expressions of anger on their faces. He actually dared to say that the three-fire guide created by their master was invented by him? This was too shameless. No matter how much he helped the Hanlin Pavilion, there was a principle that they couldn't back down from. That was their master, who was like a god or a true immortal. He couldn't be blasphemed. "I think it's time for Grand Elder to leave," Yun Yongwang said coldly. "Reading on cell phones is more refreshing." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.